Debate review. Krystal and Kyle and friends, whatever, versus Vaush. Again, this is audio only. If you want to get the video version, then you can pay Kyle Kulinski and Crystal Ball for the video version
So
on their
anyway,
Substack.
I'm really excited for this conversation. So this is streamer, Twitch streamer, YouTuber, libertarian socialist, political commentator, all around interesting character, Vaush. Enjoy. Vaush, thanks so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your work for quite a while now, and even when I disagree with you, I find your takes insightful and interesting. And so it's a real pleasure to sit here and talk with you. There's so much stuff I want to get to. I want to get into our agreements and our disagreements, among other things. But first and foremost, I want to know a little bit about you. Tell me, like, your origin story. How did you become a streamer? What got you interested in politics and all that stuff?
God, well, first of all, the pleasure's entirely mine. Thank you. And second of all, it's all been a pretty recent affair. I've always been involved in like the online debate circle, running around arguing with folks you disagree with. And I was really frustrated because it seemed like there was a really consistent aversion to particular rhetorical strategies from people on the left online. For years and years, there were basically no socialists active on YouTube, or at least they were very sparing. And when they came about, they did mostly video essay content, which is great. Mind, I love the video essays. But the right, the conservative right, they had this incredible diversity of tactics. You could find them anywhere, from hobby channels to gaming channels to like analysis and debate, live commentary, news. They were absolutely everywhere. So I thought, it'd be fun to dip my toe in the water and show people that you can be a loud, contentious, argumentative person
You can be a tough soy boy.
on the left. You don't have to give all that up. You don't have to be like a
I
hyper
agree.
sanctimonious, like quiet type to advocate those politics.
Yeah. And so what are some of the influences on your politics and your views? And for people who don't know that much, like how would you label or describe your political worldview?
I go by libertarian socialist for the most part. A lot of people conflate socialism with authoritarianism, which, while I recognize there are plenty of autocrats who have taken the label socialist for their own ends, definitely not the case. It's democracy all the way down, baby. In terms of influences, I mean, one of the communities that I was in, the large part was Destiny's. He does a lot of online debate content, so there's definitely that. The, not to win points here, but the founding of the Justice Democrats and the subsequent political effects that had also had a pretty big influence on me. The idea that we actually can make a difference, as cliched or corny as that sounds, that sort of thing. And in
Shameless
terms
pandering, I see you.
oh yeah,
Kyle
butter make
appreciates
a
it.
biscuit, absolutely.
Please go on, Vaush. Tell me more on how wonderful I am.
Don't want to get voted off at the end of the round. You know how it is. So that and the political opinions have been a synthesis of a great many. I mean, you've had Chomsky on this program, have you not?
Yes, we have.
One of the most influential people to me in terms of the foundation of my ideas, an anarchist, linguist, and it's incredible how often semantic and linguistic, disagreements come up when you're talking
We
politics.
also need a propaganda campaign. Well, it's not really. I feel like propaganda has a negative connotation to it, so we need a messaging campaign to make people really mad about healthcare in America. We need to really shove it in Americans' faces that their healthcare system is terrible and they are being exploited by giant companies that want nothing more than for them to be rotting in the streets without healthcare, other than when they need drugs. When they go to the doctor, then our healthcare system will give them enough drugs to get addicted to it and, to ruin their lives. I want to make people so mad about these issues that they actually vote for politicians who will do something about these issues. If they don't get mad, they're just not going to vote in any productive way,
Politics as
which
well.
is
So I think
upsetting.
those are
But
really intricately interlinked. Stuff like that, it all came together, and I don't know. It's just it's a big melting pot, like America. Very proud to be who I am.
So I know personally when it came to secular talk, I first had the feeling of, oh my God, I made it and I'm actually doing it when I hit 100,000 subscribers, because I remember it took me forever to get to 1,000 subscribers, and then it felt like forever to get to 10,000 subscribers. And then when I finally hit 100, I was like, in the back of my mind, this was like a lifetime goal, and I hit it relatively quickly. And so that was the first time I really felt like, oh, I made it. And even when I hit like 500, nothing felt as amazing as the 100 line. So my question for you is, whether it's subscribers or whether it's whatever on Twitch, or whatever it may be, did you feel at any point like, oh, wow, like I've made it, like I've kind of made it in this streaming thing?
I mean, it'd be impossible for me to deny that,
I
at least
feel
by
that
some metrics
every
I
day,
have,
dude.
but I'm a pretty ambitious guy. I don't know.
Fun fact, I'm gonna start working at DoorDash tomorrow, which should be fun.
I mean, it'd be impossible for me to deny that, at least by some metrics I have, but I'm a pretty ambitious guy. I don't know. There's always a bigger milestone, right? The 100,000 felt really, 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 really good. But I feel like a lot of that, I mean, you trailblazed, right? I came into this game a lot later than you did. It feels like the sky is, a lot higher.
Rooster
So
is
I
the
guess we'll have
Senate.
to see. But something tells me that even if I hit like a million or so, which, I mean, oh my God, that'd be amazing. But I feel like the next day I'd go like, okay, I hit a million. That's great. Okay. But there are gaming channels with 10 million. So
Yeah,
really,
that's
is
right.
that like, politics in
I
on
have that issue actually, with success or anything in life. You're never satisfied because once you achieve something, you have to chase that next thing. You never achieve something and say like, "Oh, I'm done now." Like you never like even if your goal is just like I want to get a decent job um like no matter what you achieve in life, it'll never be good enough. And I think Vaush is able to use it in a good way because he got rich and famous. But for a lot of people this stems from a lot of like emotional stuff and mental and mental issues
YouTube. It's
like I
a
have.
small fish in a very big pond.
Because you never feel satisfied, you know? I don't know if anybody in chat would relate with that, but no matter what, even like no matter how happy you get in moments, it never satisfies you. I feel like that's why billionaires go crazy a lot because even though they're so rich and all that stuff, being that rich doesn't matter because they want to get bigger and bigger and bigger and keep on chasing what's next.
hoping that collectively the industry expands quite a bit.
I have little kids, and they watch, these just like
Terrible channels.
horrendous,
So
like
bad.
someone like playing with toys, and they're watching them play with the toys or whatever. I'm like, you have those toys, you could go play with it, but they want to watch like the
Yeah.
other person go through these clunky routines, and it's always humbling when when you look at the view count. It's like 20 million views. And you're like, what am I doing with my life here?
Really puts you in your place. Yeah, you're like, my channels do great. You go online, find a slime tutorial with like 22 million views. with a
Right.
channel
Yeah, I'm
with
like,
6 million,
wow.
and you're like,
Yeah, wow, my radar got 200,000 views today, and my kids are like, "That's nice, Mom. We're so not impressed." So you're saying you sort of don't feel like you have made it, at least in the conception that you have for where you want to be. Is that kind of what you're saying?
yeah. I mean, I guess I'd always want to be bigger, right? It's always more fun to be had.
Yeah. Tell me about your future plans because you just raised nearly $300,000 for a relief fund for Palestinian children. Now, by the
You mean
way,
for
massive credit on
Hamas?
that. That's doing like real world good that it's hard to touch that amount of real world good. Like I don't think most people can touch that amount of real world good. So I want to give you massive credit for that. But like, what are your plans for the future in terms of getting involved in politics in a direct way, in an indirect way, or otherwise?
Oh, first of all, thanks. It was my community that put up the money. I just played the video games. I had the easy job there. But with regards to the future of things, I feel like I feel like I want to get a lot more involved in the IRL stuff because, for instance, canvassing. I have an audience, and of those, I imagine that if I decided to canvass for a given candidate, I could probably get hundreds of people out there for like
Aw.
daily door knocking in months leading up to an election.
Mini
That would be incredible,
Destiny.
and I
So
feel like a
cute.
pretty good exertion of whatever potential influence I could have. That kind of stuff really appeals to me because there are upper caps to the online debate bro thing. The fact of the matter is, it's only done by so many people, and once you've talked to those people and dealt with those ideas, that's that. The reality is, most political influence isn't decided by having the best idea and expressing that idea. It's by having the power to back it up. And having
Yeah,
followers is a
true.
form of power. So it's not just about like the epic online owns, I think. Eventually you have to take
This
that.
is something Vaush understands about politics in general, and I just got messed up. Where is he? Is he close? This person. But I feel like Vaush, the way he calculates everything he says kind of freaks me out sometimes. When he literally like adjusts rhetoric so specifically, like I don't know, it kind of freaks me out how intentional he is with his like being rhetorically effective thing.
That to the real world, a la Justice Dems, a la Inspiration,
I
et
do
cetera,
it
et cetera.
too.
But
It's
you know,
just the
it's
way
something
he
that we should
does
all
it
try to model.
is so like
Yeah,
cold-blooded
and that
sometimes.
having an actual following is
Which
a
can
very
be good, I
unusual
guess.
thing. I mean,
Yeah, it's
something
much
some
rarer
things.
than you
Kyle
think.
and I
Yeah.
definitely talk about is these cable news hosts. Very few of them. I mean, really, I think the only ones that would have an actual following that would go whatever platform they're on would probably be
No,
Maddow and
stop it.
Tucker.
Yeah.
Why?
And so
Trying to get
having
my
like
load out.
recognizing that that's a powerful thing to have and wanting to
Dead.
use it for good is actually a very unusual thing. Tell me about what gave you the inspiration to want to do the stream to raise the money for
I'll play Rocket League. I just want to
Palestinian
kill
Children's
somebody.
Relief Fund. What was that experience like? How long did you stream for? It was like 30 hours or something insane. Just like tell us a little bit more about that.
There were a lot of people in my periphery, like Chapo Trap House and Sean
Get ready.
Fitz.
I'm doing a pull stream this weekend. Gonna be swimming. Get ready.
who were doing their own live streams. And to be honest, it actually hadn't occurred to me up to that point because it's not an impulse that I have. When I see problems like that, what was going on in Israel and Palestine, the attacks on the Palestinian people, the bombings, the justifications, normally my thought is, okay, time to get angry on stream. That's the default reaction.
Right.
But I saw other people and I thought, oh wait, hold on, we actually have a whole a whole buffet of options open to us, and it's something that I really should take advantage of more often because the comparative impact of getting your community together to do something like that is way bigger than just adding it to the repertoire of whatever you're going to complain about on stream that week. It's I think I might defer to this a little more in the future. It's like it's a reflex that needs to be built up, deciding to do stuff like that. And it was a 27.5-hour stream. It was absolutely spectacular. And by the way, I was barely even feeling it by the end. Playing Nintendo 64 classics, how could I even feel tired? Great stuff.
Amen to that.
Did
I
either
don't
you
really believe you, but it's a good.
did either of you play N64 games?
Oh,
or
that was my era for sure.
Oh,
and I
Kyle
loved
rocking it? Crystal?
I had a Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I played that too.
No,
That's not
Old
respect.
Yeah.
boomer.
that's
I'm a little
just
older.
slightly before me, but no,
Old
excellent
people.
stuff either way.
And very big into Atari as well. We
Oh,
had like
see, now you
every
lost me.
Atari game under
Yeah,
the
I
sun.
played a Wii. My first ever console was a GameCube, actually.
Now you lost
So
me.
now I'm really dating myself.
Or
Tell
a
me a little
Game
bit
Boy.
about your process because
One of
I'm
those
curious.
two.
Like the streaming world is definitely outside of my sort of like purview or comfort zone or whatever. How do you prepare for a stream? How do you feel during the stream? How do you think about like afterwards? That was awesome, or here's what I need to improve on. Like, just talk a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, I try to treat it a little bit like stand-up comedy. I don't like doing very much preparation because I feel like it wrecks the flow and the
Metroid Prime, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Mario, Smash Bros, Melee, Luigi's
for
Mansion.
me, because everyone has a different approach to this. For me, I feel like with this type of thing, everyone has their style of presentation. News commentators have their own rhythm that they tend to go through. I mean, from people like Rachel Maddow, like you said, to like Glenn Beck, they all have there's a presentational style that you can rely on when you go
And
there.
she actually learned from him.
Yeah,
She said she
quoted,
modeled herself.
Yeah, she said she
after
modeled
his
herself
style.
after his style. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what a departure from the original intent. That's actually really funny.
Yeah.
But
You
for
played
me, I think
Die.
like first of all, online politics should be fun and engaging for everyone. There's no excuse to making any of this boring unless you're talking about the nitty gritty of policy details. This is interesting stuff, consequential stuff. It affects people's lives. It should be interesting. So you need to go with that, and things need to be funny. They always have to be funny because humor is disarming. And I understand that because of the way I tend to present myself, the edgy debate bro, argumentative, it can make it easy for people to dislike you. And God knows
I'm gonna get a Switch when the upgraded one comes out. There's no point in buying an old one. It's not powerful enough to play anything. But the new Pokemon games look kind of cool. I haven't played a
the case
Nintendo
with a lot of
console
reception
since
online,
the
but
actual
you
Wii,
mitigate
though.
that significantly by trying to be funny. And that's if you can keep that rhythm going, the stream feels like it passes in the blink of an eye. Afterwards, I just think, okay, were there any
Miss
ideas
Nintendo.
that I conveyed inaccurately here? Was there anything here that I meant to make a better point on, but I got distracted by the flow and ended up not because it would have been too much of a break from the rhythm of the show. And I've been trying to get better with that over time.
And do you feel like you're always able to get into kind of like a flow state when you're doing it, or sometimes do you have ways that you activate that in yourself? Do sometimes you feel like you struggle to get into that state?
Oh yeah, Pac-Man and
As long as
Chomsky.
I'm not hungry, I'm usually fine getting into it. That's the
like-
critical.
How does that Vanguard show get so many good guests? You know what show I'm talking about? That Kyle Kulinski clone show.
Though, because you can tell anytime I end stream early, I'm like, oh god, guys, I didn't have a protein bar for breakfast this morning. I'm really sorry, I can't. And that's every time, by the way. It's a tremendous weakness. I feel like a cartoon character, like a big bear, that likes picnics. Like a very obvious weakness.
It's fun you say that because
My brain shuts down when I don't eat, like
well,
literally.
Well, Cenk Uygur famously says, "I will literally forget mid-sentence what I was talking about when I'm hungry." Like he just
100%.
can't. He can't do
Same.
anything when he's hungry. But
Same.
anyway, I wanna before we get into areas where we might disagree, I want to talk a little bit more about your ideology. So you describe yourself as libertarian socialist. I've taken some political compass tests that describe me as libertarian left. I take other ones that describe me as social democratic, and I've taken ones that describe me as libertarian socialist, just like yourself. So, I actually don't even know exactly how I'd refer to myself because some of
Yeah,
my,
they're a lot more LARPy than Kyle Kulinski is. I mean, their show's called The Vanguard.
my ideas are standard social democratic, and then some of my ideas are
Kyle's a
little
normie.
post-capitalist. So
He's the
I
Joe
guess my
Rogan
question for you is in
of
regards to
progressive
worker-owned
commentators.
co-ops. When I think of worker-owned co-ops, I generally like the idea, and I like the idea of incentivizing them as well. And this is a question that I asked Richard Wolff, though, which is, do you see, is it reasonable to say that businesses over a certain size, it makes more sense to me for those to be democratic, but as long as you have sufficient regulation of the marketplace, that if you have a smaller business, that actually that traditional capitalist hierarchy is not inherently oppressive. Would you agree with that?
Isn't democratic and worker co-ops, aren't those both two different things, though?
I don't know.
One is socialist
Yeah,
and
I
one
think
is
worker
democratic.
cooperatives have their place. I think that fundamentally they tend to be a more ethical form of organization than a traditional autocratic firm where,
Yeah.
the boss is the ruler and that's that. But there are natural limitations on the extent to which they can function. So one example would be there are a lot of businesses that are just two guys working together,
Yeah.
or two girls. It's 2021, who knows? Like in that environment, the legal framework of a worker cooperative in some instances can seem like a regulatory bureaucratic mess that only interferes with the work that they do. So I think the argument should be, we shouldn't impose cooperatives on everything. We should look at the available data and say, which policies can we impose to make sure worker cooperatives are heavily incentivized in the industries where they will do the most good. And it's possible that over time, as worker cooperatives become more normalized, more culturally and legally more off the hat, it'll be easier to incorporate them into different forms of organization that are currently unviable. A lot of it has to do with like civil structure, right? When people expect to be ruled over by an autocratic manager, that's what society defers to. That's what we organize around. But when the opposite is the case, well, for hundreds of years, serfs were led by feudal lords. That was considered a natural form of organization. If we tried that today, there'd be riots.
Feudalism, Richard Wolff tactics.
Maybe that's the next step. You gradually transition into something, and then 100 years from now, nobody will ever even believe that people used to have autocratic managers.
Vaush. Okay, so Richard Wolff tried saying this, but came off so bad when he was talking to like Destiny. Feudalism was a thing, and then it turned into capitalism, and that happened. I think that same thing is going to happen for socialism. Capitalism is eventually going to turn into socialism. Like the society is going to switch, the system's going to change. Freaking Richard Wolff said that so terribly, but Vaush pretty much says it as good as you can here. It might be a simple transition, just like feudalism to capitalism. Vaush can actually talk, unlike Richard Wolff.
What is your view so far of the Biden administration, how they've done? Have they met expectations or exceeded expectations, lower than your expectations? Like, just give me a little bit of a flavor of your assessment of his term so far.
There are a few things he's done that I was impressed by. I expected an infrastructure bill to be posited later in the administration. I knew it would happen, but I thought it would happen later. Unfortunately, for people who want to criticize the Biden administration, most Democrats are going to be enamored with some very easy wins that he has to roll up because Trump did so many obviously bad things that he gets to undo via executive action that it's like, of course,
Yeah,
okay,
true.
yeah, it's like I would love to live in a country where a lot of the stuff Democrats fight for is like taken for granted. But
Cliche.
unfortunately, that isn't the country that we live in. So Biden saying, yeah, Jack, actually, ICE is no longer allowed to smack Mexican immigrants on the head when they see them on the street. That passing that EO, that's like, oh God, what a breath of fresh air. Biden
Yeah, this
finally
guy's
made
amazing.
sense. Yeah.
Right.
He's probably going to end up being one of the better Democratic presidents, but that's a limited framework. What is
People
a
who
good
keep on
Democratic?
messaging me and telling me that Joe Biden is going to be one of the worst presidents in American history. You people, stop messaging me. You literally do not understand how history works. No president in American history was perfect or even somewhat close to perfect. So, like Biden, you compare him to other presidents. You don't compare him to an idealistic vision of your authoritarian, like Bernie, your dream Bernie world in which Bernie is president and he gets to institute Medicare for all with unilateral executive order.
President, and how far does
Compare
that go?
Biden
Really,
to other
we should be
presidents and
examining
their
ways to critique
performances.
him that acknowledge the relative strengths of his presidency, but then say like, okay, compared to what? And what
Yeah.
are we aiming for exactly here? Was this infrastructure bill really sufficient? Are we really doing anything about the rampant growth of the military-industrial complex? What is with the constant posturing when it comes to his allegiance to the progressive left and then his like deference to the groups that ignore or oppose them? Stuff like that, I think like
What do you make of that, actually? 'Cause, I mean, the obvious examples here, too, are, $15 minimum wage just completely fell off the agenda. Public option, which was already the more conservative position in the Democratic primary.
King
In the
Bernard.
budget he just released, it doesn't even contemplate, like we're not even trying, in spite of the fact that there's just a pandemic and a lot of people saddled with massive medical bills. It looks like they're dropping the prescription drug reform plan just to negotiate with drug companies, which is the most obvious and popular thing in the world, but obviously comes in for a lot of criticism from big pharma. What do you make of those pieces? What does that say about his orientation towards the left? And what is it with all of these pieces lately that are like, we promise he's really influenced by progressives and he's really listening to the left? And look, Ron Klain retweeted someone. Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
yeah, the thing that's absolutely wait, can I swear here?
Yeah.
Of course.
The thing that's absolutely bullshit here is that the argument is like, oh, well, Biden can't do everything on his own. Sure, we know, and we know how the filibuster works, okay? But if it was Bernie who was president, God, that alternate universe, let me be there.
True.
We know that even if he wasn't capable of pushing a policy through, he would be advocating for it every time somebody put a microphone in front of his face. Even
Well,
if
Bernie's a populist. Bernie probably would have been what Trump was, in a sense where he would go to different towns across America and form Medicare for All rallies, just like Donald Trump would form rallies against, to get people mad about immigrants and immigration. Bernie would have done that. He's a populist. I think Joe Biden, when it comes to advocating for the policies he does care about, I think he's doing well. Obama really only cared about Obamacare right away. I think he's doing better than Obama though so far. I think Biden is going to end up being a far better president historically than Obama, to be honest. At least
He
how
couldn't
things are going
snap
right
his
now.
fingers and make Medicare for all, or even a public option available instantly. Every chance he got, he would be pushing for it. But Biden doesn't. Biden stays quiet on a lot of the more progressive promises. He makes these promises, but then slowly the prominence of their advocacy drops from the speeches until he stops talking about it. And then the Democrats go, oh, well, you can't expect him to single-handedly do this or that. And, well, no, I can't. But I can expect him to talk about it. That is certainly a thing that I can expect of him. Trump never had any problem talking about the most ludicrous ideas his administration wanted to pass. A lot of those stupid ideas he actually got pushed through sheer dumb force of will. But we can't talk about a public option openly? No. This
there's
is...
no way
Oh,
Trump,
no.
for example, would let the Senate parliamentarian get in the way of something that
Okay,
he
you're
wanted to do.
fired.
No.
We don't care about the parliamentarian. Who are you?
Respect. Yeah, we must respect the No, of course not. Plus, this constant the compromise stuff. We must work with the
Baited.
Republicans. No, we don't have to. Actually, no, we don't. No, because they don't work with us. They obfuscate and they obstruct constantly. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. With regards to the Biden administration, they're trying to wrest control of the Democratic Party away from its more democratic, socialist, progressive elements by encouraging everyone to believe deeply in their hearts that, you know what, hey, in spite of how it seems, Biden is listening. But
Yeah.
they'll quiet with that over time, too. They saw what happened with Obama. 8 years of relative disappointment from the left wing of the Democratic Party, and Bernie Sanders does really well in the primary against Hillary Clinton. They know what happens when they don't placate, at least, in language, the far left.
No.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean,
Taka
listen,
Rooster, thank you so much for a kind donation of $10. Wow. Just playing Call of Duty. There will never be a perfect president. Yeah, that's the thing. If Bernie was president, they'd be very upset with him because they would assume, Bernie could do whatever he wanted. With, the parliamentarian and all that stuff, Bernie probably wouldn't be getting more done than Biden right now. There actually is a reality in which Biden has been able to get more done than Bernie would have been able to because he appears as a moderate. He knows how to work within government better and make connections better than Bernie
thing that
can.
got under my skin the most is actually news that came out this week that apparently they're going to, all the way until September 30th, they said we're not doing any more reconciliation bills. Well, then you're admitting you're not going to do anything because you're not going to get anything through regular order. That's 60 votes. You need a bunch of Republicans. They're not going to sign on for anything. You could literally say, we have the cure for cancer. To release it, you guys have to sign on. They'd be like, fuck off, we're not going to do that. So no reconciliation, obviously nothing through regular order. And then the only thing that would remain is executive orders like, legalizing marijuana or eliminating student loan debt or whatever. So what are they going to do? Nothing until September 30th. So I early on predicted that he would have a good first week or two, Biden, and he did. Like you said, I think reversing the Trump executive orders was a good thing. I mean, he should have gone further, but still, it's better than nothing. But
The consequence of authoritarian is bad, though. Well, FDR, like I said in my one video, a lot of people considered FDR an authoritarian because he did things through executive power. Although it was within his power, he didn't even care about asking about the democratic process. He's like, all right, at this moment in history, we need to do this right now. We need a new deal. I'm pushing this through in any way I can. He didn't care that much about democracy. So FDR is one of our, he's highly regarded as one of our best presidents, but he was categorically an authoritarian. So it's an interesting conversation here. Biden is nothing close to that. He wants government to function. He wants democracy to function. He's a perfect liberal,
then after that, it was the one COVID relief package, and then everything just sort of dwindles away, and now we're left with nothing but the fluff pieces that are like, Biden's listening to the left, even though he's doing nothing now.
It's like your first day. It's just like your first day at work, right? If you never want to do a day of work at your new job, you do really, really good for 6 months, and
But then you have to think, okay, if 80% of our government does not want to do something that 80% of our people do want to do, then is it right as an authoritarian to just do it? Because and that, within a democracy, it's a representative democracy, so the representation matters. But if 80% of the people want you to do something, as a president, are you right to do that? Are you abiding by democracy when you do that? Are you disobeying the current rules of the system in general? It's a hard conversation.
You taper off. Give everyone a really good first impression, and then people will give you a lot of slack and leeway when you decide to start being, lazy. Not that I think Biden's lazy. I think this is a very calculated effort on his part and on the part of the Democratic Party to meet their goal for how far left they're willing to go, but to do it in the way that best placates the voting base. And in that effect, I think they've been extremely successful. I think that Biden has made himself look very good, and he's done a lot of good. But we're going to see how the rest of his presidency turns out, right?
It's an option of last resort, in my opinion. There's a lot of arguments for unilateral power in a lot of situations. For example, there's a reason a president has emergency powers during national emergencies, because you need an executive to command a country so it can move efficiently, because democracy is not efficient in any way. So you need to be able to move quickly sometimes. So it's it's an
how
interesting
long
one.
does that afterglow last?
Yeah, the reason why his approval rating was really high and now is okay
Middling.
to good,
Mhm.
is because he gave people $1,400 and he expanded the child tax credit and like very basic things that people were like, oh, this is making my life better. So I think that explains it. Now, I mean, could you imagine if he actually tried on the real core Democratic things, we'd all be really happy. But I want to ask you about some areas where we may have disagreements. I'm not sure. I actually don't think we have much disagreement on this stuff, but we have to flesh it out in order to get to
I'll
some point of
lie
agreement.
just to get some real disagreement here, just to fight it out.
Just to make it
So-
interesting. Help us get more subscribers, Vaush.
The first one I want to ask you about is Bernie or bust. So what's your position on Bernie or bust? And then also, like, what do you think mine is? And then I'll lay out what my actual one is.
Sure. So my position on there are two basic arguments. The first one is that I think that by basically any objective measure, you could argue that Biden's just a superior presidential candidate to Trump in terms of the harm done and the good done, and et cetera, et cetera. Those arguments are well worn and played out, and I feel like they're fairly self-evident. The other argument that I have, and it's the one that I think is a little more appealing to progressives like myself and like both of you, is that the vast, vast majority of the Democratic Party, the voters, they're not as far left as we are, tragically. And we need to move them over. That's our job. And the best way to do that is to show them the failings of the candidate they thought would save them. If you let Trump win again, and Trump runs this country into the ground, then what are they going to think? Are they going to think Bernie Sanders could have saved us? No, they're going to think a Democrat could have saved us.
True.
Anybody to pull us out of this wreck. And we saw that too, because in the 2020 election, the number one reason people voted for Biden was electability. They stopped being concerned about how far we could go and started being concerned with the bulwark, anything but Trump. So you choose electability. How much of a manufactured narrative that is largely irrelevant. It's what they were willing to bite onto. But after Obama, Bernie did better in the primary against Hillary Clinton than he did in 2020 against the Voltron of moderate Democrats. And I think the reason for that is after 8 years of Obama, Democrats weren't as terrified of the Republican Party. They were willing to experiment, to try more. It didn't work out, sure, but he did well, Bernie, given the circumstances. After Trump, they're just terrified. The threat of the Republican Party is how the Democrat Party keeps its voters in line. You have to pick the most moderate, centrist, uncontroversial candidate because the alternative is lunacy. And unfortunately, they're right. So we should be happy that Biden won, if for no other reason than because it gives us an opportunity to criticize the people who are holding that line down.
So
As for
no, go ahead.
As for your position, I think you would probably agree with the substance of both of those critiques. A lot of the Bernie or bust stuff that took place prior to the election, I felt was posturing. Democratic Party, you better listen to us because if you don't, you're not going to win the election. And I don't necessarily have an issue with that as a strategy, though I'm not entirely sure if the Democrats care whether or not they win elections. It seems like their jobs are a lot easier when they sit in the sidelines and complain. It makes them look a lot better than when they're actually trying to lead. I'm not entirely sure. I know there was a lot of divisiveness around the Bernie or bust stuff that was centered around disagreements that I think could have been mitigated with a conversation over some drinks,
No, you don't want an authoritarian system ever. You never want that. Ideally, you have a functioning democracy, a representative democracy in the U.S. that doesn't require somebody taking unilateral action. So, like marijuana legalization, ideally that would have been done in 2012. Public opinion went majority to legalizing marijuana, or a strong
all
majority.
sides.
So, but let's say somebody comes to you and they say, Vaush, I am hardcore Bernie or bust. There's no way I'm voting for any other moderate Democrat. If Bernie doesn't get the nomination, I'm done. I'm out. Make your best
playing
case
Rocket
to try
League
to
next.
convince that person. Because I know
This is
you
boring.
were very critical of the Bernie or bust people, but I'm curious what you would say to somebody who's hardcore in that camp to try to convince them.
Well, depends on the road we go down. If that person thinks that Trump and Biden are comparable, how dangerous they'll be as presidents, then I think there's a lot of evidence against that, and I would go through that. Whether we're talking harm to minority groups, whether we're talking about the tax cuts or the regulation of America's economy, that kind of stuff. I think there are really strong arguments on that front. If we're talking about anti-democratic strategy, then I'd give the argument that I just gave to you, the whole we need Biden to be up there so we can criticize him. And then there were also people who just said, like, as a matter of principle, I'm not voting for any more of these centrist dipshits. I'm done. Which, I mean, I just don't do anything on principle, really. For me, everything is a utilitarian question. It's how much good does this action bring? How much harm does this action bring? Which I understand is very unsatisfying to a lot of people, but I also think it's historically the strategy that leads to the most civil rights victories. If you go back and say, take a look at King or the suffragettes, the gay rights movement back in the 80s, you'll find that a lot of the leaders were almost cynical in the way they approached the advocacy for their positions, not because they were cruel or heartless or because they didn't care, but because they saw in the past the wreckage of 1,000 movements that had died on principle, and they didn't want to be like that. And I respect that to an extent. I think it's just an unfortunate part of political organizing.
I voted for Biden, and I feel like that was definitely the right
Let's go.
choice. And part of my
I love it.
analysis is I think that Trump just made politics worse all the way around. I mean, it's sort of like what
It's
you're
true.
pointing to. He made it really easy for Democrats. All they had to be was not Trump. All they had to do was point to Trump. All they had to do in the primary to get people in line with the candidate they wanted to
Of
win was
course,
say,
Bernie would have fought more for those issues, but like Biden ran as somebody who was going to be pretty chill and push for progressivism sometimes, and that's how he won. And that's what he had a mandate to do. He had a mandate to return America back to normalcy or whatever, and that's
hey,
what he's
this
doing.
is the electable guy, and my God, we
Of
can't
course,
have
Bernie
Donald
would
Trump
have done
again,
more for
and
those
with some
policies.
justification, as you said. My concern is that they're going to basically, I mean, first of all, we might get Donald Trump again in 2024, so we're going to have the replay of that whole dynamic. And even if it's not Trump, I think they're going to use that same tactic of whoever it is,
This is so
turning them
boring.
into just as bad as Trump, or even worse. This one's even worse than Trump, in order to continue to be
Who's
able to like
Carter?
use that fear, justifiable fear of like this is terrible and the country's going to hell and like this is incredibly bad for a lot of people, to make sure that they continue to just say, look, you got to vote for. I know you may not love this candidate, but you got to vote for him because they're the ones that can win, and that's the only thing we really need
He
to focus on.
hit me with the thing.
I mean, they're playing good cop, bad cop, basically. They're just batting it back between the parties. They may be, Democrats good, Republicans bad, whatever. But the ultimate goal is
I'm so
for the good
bad.
cop to
All right,
extract
Rocket
your,
League.
consent, but through the threat of the bad cop. And I mean, as time goes on, you're right. That pattern's going to get worse and worse. The future of the Republican Party is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a leader, a trailblazer who will be known in history books.
So how do
And
you
she's
get
not
out,
even
how do you get out of
close
that
to how bad
cycle?
that gets.
That's the part I don't really know the answer to. Like, and that was the part of the Bernie or bust arguments that I did find compelling. Is like, well, how do you break this cycle where they're just going to continue to, go down this?
Yeah, that's the thing. Some moderate policies Bernie Sanders would have had an even harder time getting through. Whenever people call Biden radical, a lot of Americans scoff at it, but calling Bernie Sanders radical is a lot easier to sell. So like Joe Manchin has more political leeway to reject more of the stimulus package, for example.
Trump, and then it's going to be Marjorie Taylor Greene or whoever. How do
Right.
you ever get out of this dynamic?
Well,
If
I
Bernie was
do
president.
think that a low voter turnout or abstaining from the vote out of principle won't break that cycle. While I agree it's important that cycle be broken, I don't think the proposed strategy, the implied strategy there from a lot of people online was
No, we don't know that, Cloud, but I mean, we can make educated guesses on it.
necessarily effective because low voter turnout. I mean, politicians love that. They have to pander less. They can just do what they want.
Yeah.
But with breaking that cycle, it's really, really difficult. So there's an inevitable cycle break, I think, and it's climate change. Eventually, the consequences of climate change are going to be so disastrous for the human species that we are going to face a breaking point, and the traditional political order is going to stop meaning what it used
I
to.
got a bad
And I'm
teammate
giving
right
that
away.
about 40 years. Until that point, and we don't want to wait until that point, I feel like the best bet that we have, and by we I mean like you and I, the best bet that we have is taking advantage of this zeitgeist, this modern discontent with capitalism and with the Democratic Party, and doing everything possible to move the party in a position where the electable candidate is the progressive one. Where
Okay.
people like Biden are treated like people like Klobuchar. Oh, sure, they're a moderate, but they're not electable. The electable one, oh, that's AOC. Oh, that's Nina Turner. Oh, that's Ilhan Omar. It's frustrating to operate within the bounds of electoralism for situations like this because the anarchistic positions that I hold make me want to say like, oh, take to the streets and workers' revolution, et cetera, et cetera. But that needs to wait until we have public support. The idea that any kind of massive popular movement is going to break this way, I just think we need to do more groundwork. But we've done more in the past decade than any left-leaning movement has done in America in the past century. So I think we're building off a lot of momentum,
So there's a lot of stuff I want to say in response.
Vaush was mask off when he said he only does stuff on principle. Yeah, I mean, or no, he doesn't do anything on principle. I mean, he doesn't do anything at all. Kyle Kulinski is the complete opposite of that. He does everything on principle. I'm in the middle of that equation. I think it's not a good thing to not do anything on principle whatsoever. I think no matter what you do, even if you like change up your rhetoric sometimes, if you try to appeal to emotion, if you use some, you use some convincing language to get people on your side, even if you do that, I think it should all be grounded in some type of principle.
That first of all, to your last point there, the
But
problem is the media largely
Vaush might
controls
agree
that
with
narrative
that.
about who's
Who
electable and who's not
knows?
electable, and they'll just deny all the evidence in the world that even that the left is more electable, and they'll just keep asserting that it has to be the moderate. So it's like the game is rigged on that front a little bit. And in terms of your point on breaking the cycle, how you don't think the Bernie or bust people necessarily have the solution, I actually agree with you on that. But what concerns me is that a lot of people who said, oh, I'll hold my nose and vote for Biden, but we start fighting him on day one, they immediately turned around and became hardcore Biden apologists and started saying like everything he was doing is wonderful, and they get mad
Are
at
you
other people
including
for trying to push
shots at
Biden.
Vaush?
What's that?
Are you including me in that? Some people say I'm that, which
No, I'm not including you in that.
Okay, that's just yours. There's a
But
picture of
that
me
is what
wearing
happened with a
Biden
lot of
shirt.
them, and that's very disturbing to see. And then the one other point I wanted to make, just to come back to the main question on Bernie or bust, because I wanted to get this out there. In 2016, I actually debated Bernie or busters, where I was taking the position that we would debate the lesser evil question. And I would say, look, you could agree with lesser evil voting or not, but I don't think it's debatable. Definitely Hillary Clinton is a lesser evil than Donald Trump. So I was hammering away on what I think is the empirical question, and I had those debates in 2016. Now, in 2020, if anybody wanted to have that discussion on who actually is the lesser evil, I don't think that's a difficult question. Again, I think Joe Biden is by far the lesser evil. Even if you just look at whatever, marginal tax rates, he's way better on that. He wouldn't have done the 2017 Trump tax cut. He wouldn't have done the deregulation to the extent that Trump did the deregulation. I go on and on with 1,000 ways in which he's not as bad as Trump. But, I guess the reason why I was so sympathetic to Bernie or busters is because I do find that, like,
He was a Bernie or buster.
nobody seems to have fucking standards anymore about anything. Like, nobody has moral red lines about anything. And when you see a guy who voted for the Iraq war, which killed hundreds of thousands of innocent
No, this is a
civilians,
dumb
and this is a
point.
guy who's responsible, at least partly responsible, for the drug war, which locked up so many innocent young men and women of color, and he was unapologetic about a lot of this shit. I look at that and I go, if somebody says I can't vote for that person, it's hard for me to be like, how dare you? I feel like I get it. Like, I get why you would take that position, even though on the lesser evil question, I think Biden is the lesser evil. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's very morally unsatisfying. What we want, and what I want, is for there to be a sense of justice in politics. The idea that you can look at a candidate and go, no, your history is repulsive. I don't care. You're not the one for me. Unfortunately, if the other guy's worse, it seems like it's a moral question we don't have the luxury of meaningfully addressing. Maybe in a world without first past the post voting, if you had ranked choice voting, if we could get third parties with some real viability, it seems like maybe that would be something we could address a little more substantively. But right now, it just feels like the process of being in politics is just like an endless wheel of suffering that we just get to hop on. And the frustrating thing, by the way, is that
It's way
it's
too
only
accurate.
something we have to deal with, because the Republican voters get what they want. Republican voters want, with the greatest of respect to all the wonderful, insane Republican voters that I happen to know, Republican voters want some crazy shit, okay? Republican voters are fearful and anxious, and they will vote for any strong man who will tell them that the problem is Marxism and not, I don't know, what capitalism is doing to the economy, that the problem is trans people in the bathrooms rather than literally anything else. And they're going to keep getting that, because in terms of the fundamental systems that move this country, I don't think Republicans pose that much of a threat to it. Not to capitalism, certainly. They certainly seem to be on board with maintaining that. Democrats, on the other hand, the more extreme wing of the Democratic Party, wants to substantively change these systems. Bernie Sanders, yourself, me. So we get the real pushback. That's that ratchet effect. The Republican Party turns things to the right. The Democratic Party keeps things from moving back to the left. But with all that being said, the one hope that we have fundamentally is that change in the air, is the fact that right now there is
Biden
more...
was one senator that believed Bush. Biden's main flaw was believing Bush. He's like, I trusted Bush. Even you can go back and watch it from 2001. He believed, or 2002. He believed the Bush. He wasn't there saying, we need to go in, we need to bomb them to shit, we need to kill everybody. He wasn't doing that. You can't place the blame of Iraq on Biden in the same way you can't blame Bernie for Afghanistan for his votes on that. Or you're literally calling everybody in U.S. history a war criminal. And the crime bill stuff wasn't his biggest contribution, the freaking violence against women's part.
Open vocal discontent of the Democratic Party from within the Democratic Party.
That isn't a good reason to have worse outcomes with everything. It's literally every issue. It's everything that Trump is way worse on. It's just everything.
Than there has been in my entire lifetime, and I'd be willing to bet in both your lifetimes as well. Because I remember the Obama years, okay? And back then, the progressive fringe was this tiny, irrelevant minority of people.
We should still criticize stuff Biden did. Like, we should criticize it as like, hey, nobody in government should have been doing this. It's a bad policy. like you're right, Black Americans did support, like they do support harsher crime measures in a lot of places. And we need to be able to communicate to different communities that aren't just white college kids, like because that was Bernie's only big demographic, or not white college kids, but college kids in general, all college kids. Yeah, young white people, young black people, young Hispanic people. Like he got all the young people Bernie did, and young people don't vote. Got to connect to different communities better and all that stuff.
Of anti-Iraq war, like
Living in
hardliners from
America is
back
a
in the
war
day,
crime.
and they had no influence over the party.
And I
And
hate it
now
too.
this
You know what I hate? I want to be able to criticize Joe Biden for the crime bill and for voting for the war in Iraq. I want to be able to criticize him all the time for that stuff. But when I do criticize him for that stuff, somebody comes in and they're like, "Yeah, I agree. Biden is the reason for every evil in the world." Like, no, you have to criticize it realistically, or nobody's gonna listen to you. Nobody's gonna listen to you if you go up and say Joe Biden's an evil warmonger. You're just not gonna get Democratic votes doing that, or even independent votes. And at that point, you're really hurting our cause. If you care about progressivism and any of this actually happening, if you care about improving people's lives, you want to approach this in a good way.
course between us and the moderates takes place every hour, every
Never
day in Washington.
Mussolini.
And that gives me a bit of hope. Maybe nothing comes of it and climate change comes and we haven't resolved the problem by then and we're
Oh,
screwed.
that's a
That's
rough one.
entirely possible. I just don't know if there's any method forward that has a 100% shot.
Yeah, and I think Bernie deserves a
I
lot
feel
of
like
credit.
Mussolini. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's probably the the less controversial one to say.
For
Love the guy.
expanding the possibility for critique, because I mean, this is just my own personal experience. Like during the Obama era, I was at MSNBC, like, yay Obama on most everything. I mean, I got things right on TVP. I did, raise voices of objection
Yeah,
occasionally.
sure,
but
Biden was justifying staying in Iraq, but that isn't the criticism people make about Biden. They criticize him for everything leading up to it. They act like Biden's the cause for it. That'd be great, actually. Make that criticism of Biden, even after he voted for it, years after, when we were just there for oil and all. And once it was clear that WMDs were not there, Biden still supported it after that. But saying like Joe Biden is responsible for the deaths of like a couple 100,000 people,
was much more of
doesn't
just a
work.
partisan cheerleader, at that point. And I
But the
think it was
WMD
when
thing,
Bernie came
yeah,
along
sure.
that I was like, oh, you're allowed to be in a different place than where I am. You're allowed to think like, oh, this is insufficient and there's a lot more that we could do
It's
here.
inspiring. Yeah.
And I'm gonna guess that I wasn't the only one to have that experience. I'm curious though, like, what is your
I
assessment
just know more
of
about
how
Hitler.
to break that
So I
media
know he's
stranglehold?
bad, like
Because
super bad.
this is
So,
part of
like,
why Trump was able to be so successful, because Republicans already had been fed a steady diet for years and years of like, fuck the media, don't trust them. And so then when he came along and said that, they bought it and they didn't go along with what the Republican establishment wanted. The Democratic base, the minute that the sort of mainstream media organs settled on Joe Biden's the one, the way that the numbers flipped
Yeah.
was astonishing
It
to
was,
see.
yeah.
That was maybe the biggest revelation to me in the primary, was just how much
you don't see the point in babying Democrats? It's approaching it in good faith and being nice to people. That's how you get people to actually agree with you. You have to get people to want to vote for you. You can't just like wave your finger at people, say they support war criminals. Joe Biden is very popular. Obama is very popular. They're more popular than Bernie Sanders. If we just keep saying to people Joe Biden's a war criminal, then we're just going to be political. That's not even true, but we're going to be political outsiders anyway. Being a fringe group is great, but I'd rather help people personally.
power
And you can
control
do that without letting go of your
those,
principles. You can
sort of legacy
argue
media institutions still had over the
with
Democratic
the facts.
primary
It's not about
base.
babying
Do you
people.
see
It's
that
about doing
shifting
what
at
makes sense.
all?
You're not
Do you
going to get
think that
somebody.
those media organs
You're not going to get somebody to go from liberal, boring suburban liberal to socialist in one swift motion. You have to plant seeds in their heads and keep on moving them over as much as they can. It's like the argument with woke capitalism. Like, yeah, it sucks that people only have soft support for LGBT issues and they don't know that much about these issues or know how to support these issues. But I'd rather them sort of support LGBT and like trans rights than not support it at all. I'd rather people support BLM in a very disingenuous way than not support it at all. It puts them in a position where they can improve moving forward.
themselves can be reformed? What are your
It
thoughts
doesn't
there?
make you look like a
I think that
liar.
can be
It
exploited.
makes you look like a liar if you call Joe Biden a war criminal. What are you talking about?
There's an old quote from, Actually, I don't. Is it from Marx? No, I genuinely
Sure,
don't remember
say he
the actual
didn't have
person that's from it.
foresight. Say you are really critical of his involvement in the Iraq War. If you approach the criticism in that way, people are going to listen to you a lot more than if you just go up, Joe Biden's an evil war criminal. Even if you believe Joe Biden's a war criminal, you should want to argue in this way because you can actually get somewhere with it.
It implies violence, which I'm in no way insinuating here, but it's the capitalists shall hang us.
If I'm directly asked about what, if they ask me what,
Last capitalist shall sell us the rope on which he will hang, or something like that. I think that media outlets are traitors to their cause and always will be. The Republicans were, and the Democrats will be too, if there's money in it. Right now, unfortunately, the majority of the Democratic voter base is, you know how they are. And 20 years ago, the majority of the Republican voter base was neocon. Now it's not. And the media, when they saw the blood in the air, the Republican media, I mean, they swapped gears really quick on that too. And now they make their money off of pandering. I mean, for God's sake, look, there was a whole campaign to stop watching Fox News because they had the audacity to accurately report on the results of the election because they didn't want to get sued the way that Newsmax and OAN were threatened with lawsuits. And that was enough to get people to say, oh, we're done with Fox News. The zeitgeist over there shifted massively. But over here in the Democratic Party, some parts, I think, and this is my dream scenario, we make the Republican Party irrelevant. I mean, dead on arrival. Electoral college gone. Republican presidential candidates can never break 40% of the vote. And at that point, America is controlled by the Democratic Party, which is bad. But you see what happened with Obama. Democratic president after Democratic president, moderate after moderate after moderate. And what gets better? What changes? Nothing, really. This country may be some incremental progress in some incredibly minute ways, but there are backslides. And every year there will be some new outrage from Democratic progressives about how they're betraying their voter base.
I don't think Bernie or Biden are war criminals. No, I do not hold that position.
By supporting pharmaceutical industry or the military-industrial complex. And the idea of a progressive alternative grows more and more attractive now that the bad cop isn't in the room, the Republican Party. And if that happens, there will be more money to be made from placating those radicals than there will be placating the moderates. And the media, no matter how loyal they are to the Democratic Party, will shift to their true loyalty, which is money.
Look at that shot
I think
backwards.
That's a tendency that we can exploit if we have command over the popular will.
So, one area where we've definitely had disagreement is on this issue of the populist right. But I do think that some of the thoughts that people think I have and people think Krystal has, they're not exactly accurate. So let me be clear about my view on the populist right, and then I'll get your response. So I think that there is no populist right in terms of elected officials. I think they're all frauds. I think the one that they pointed to for the longest time as if they were serious was Josh Hawley, because Josh Hawley, every now and then, it's super rare, but every now and then he'll say something that's vaguely economically populist, like, oh, I'm for the $2,000 checks, which, by the way, he immediately flipped on as soon as Biden did the $1,400 checks. Now all of a sudden he's saying, oh my God, well, I'm worried about inflation and all this shit, right? So in terms of elected officials, there are zero populist right people. So it's a fraud. It's just a game. They're trying to get more voters while not delivering on any of it. But I do think there are actually populist right people in the United States of America, and regular folks, I mean. So, for example, 2 times Obama voters, and there were millions of these, 2 times Obama voters who then flipped to Trump. And the reason they gave was, hey, at least this guy said he's going to keep my job here. Now, granted, those people have other issues, like they overlook Trump's bigotry.
Kyle's not wrong, but these aren't right-wing populists. These are people who respond to populist messaging. They aren't like right-wing or left-wing or whatever, but they just want populism in general. They want to feel angry about something. They don't like the system. They don't like how life is going. So they respond to populist energy, which can either be hate insurance companies, which is justified. That populist energy can either be hate insurance companies, hate the government. It can be hate pharmaceutical companies. It can be hate immigrants, which is not justified, obviously, but it can be focused in all these directions. So I do agree there are normal people, regular people, I mean regular, not normal, but regular people who respond to these messages. Right-wingers who might respond to somebody who comes in as populist or whatever.
Overlook all these terrible things. But would you not concede
a lot of people's ideologies aren't like that thought in, like they aren't super deep in their ideological holes. They don't even view their thoughts as an ideology. Really?
Other issues, like they overlook Trump's bigotry, they overlook all these terrible things. But would you not concede that the concept of populist right is real in the sense that some voters in America are that, and it's okay to make alliances only on the issues where we agree with those people?
I think so 2 quick points to that one. I say quick. That's a total lie. I'm about to talk for a while. So first and foremost, I have to judge people by what they do rather than their intentions. Trump was never going to help workers in America, and really he didn't. He brought over a couple thousand jobs back.
Agreed.
Now,
No, he lost them.
yeah. I mean, and then then the COVID mishandling led to millions more. So I mean, we're not great there. Now, can I blame the people who voted for Trump for not seeing into the future? Not every American voter is going to be a political analyst. I feel like most people tapped into the process could have seen that Trump was anti-worker from day one, but I can't really blame your average voter for that position. That being said, when we take a look at the broader consequences of the populist right backing, I agree with you. I don't think there are any politicians that actually cater to that.
Yeah.
The most effective right populists in history were, of course, the Nazis, who were very effective. I mean, they called themselves, for God's sake, the Workers' Party. They were very, very effective in taking the criticisms that a frustrated working class had of the economy and of the country they lived in, exploiting them, and then directing them in a sort of nationalistic fervor against enemies of the state. Which is, if you take a look,
right-wing populism, like the politicians that use right-wing populism, they just hate democracy. They hate freedom. They hate all that stuff. They are more congruent with the, like you said, the Nazi party. You know, the Workers' Party, the National Socialist Party that pretends to stand for workers.
look at some of the initial promises made by the Nazi Party before they really took power, you see some shit in there that they were never going to do. I mean, like all the workers' rights they were throwing in there, absolutely not. But it got people's attention. Now, that doesn't mean every populist right type is a Nazi. That would be ridiculous. But there is a long-standing history of these people being taken advantage of. Tucker Carlson's a great example. This is a guy who is on record saying that he is a simp for billionaires. He does not vote for like edge line candidates. He votes for like the safe choice every time. He backs essentially every single
right-wing populism is real. There is liberal populism and illiberal populism. And by liberal, I don't mean the political ideology. I mean the democratic format, liberalism. So illiberalism would be like fascism. They reject everything about democracy, about liberal democracy. Those are the two kinds of populism. There is no ideological populism. It's just populism used by an ideology. It's populist language. Like Bernie Sanders, when he speaks about hating drug companies and getting people mad about that, he's directing populism in a way that can change our liberal democracy. When Trump does that, he is getting people mad about immigration for illiberal means because he cares about authoritarianism and power. Those are two like fundamentally different things. There's no like, I guess you could say left and right populism as in like who uses it, I guess. If a socialist uses it, you could say left populism. But I feel like that categorization kind of skews what populism actually means.
Right position that you possibly could, with no allowances made for workers' rights or
in
autonomy.
my opinion.
He's fraud, total fraud.
He's complete fraud, and he's the most popular guy on TV. So to what extent is there an authentic populist?
Oh yeah, that's crazy. The Hill took down their freaking video. Yeah, they're all money hungry. I know Kyle said that when Krystal and Sagar left, the company should be nice to them because they built it. But it is really cold-blooded out there with these freaking corporations, dude.
Right position that you possibly could, with no allowances made for workers' rights or autonomy.
Yeah, he's a fraud, total fraud.
He's complete fraud, and he's the most popular guy on TV. So to what extent is there an authentic populist right? I genuinely don't know. But to the extent that there is one, and I'm sure there is, because I've talked to some of these people with real concerns, I'll say this: we work together on solutions, not problems. Because I say I have a problem with the corrupt media class, and to their credit, Nazis agree with me. But I think it's because they're capitalists, and Nazis think it's because they're Jews. I say, I want more freedom of speech, and I'm thinking of like, like Trump threatening to deport people who burn the flag, and then people say like, oh yeah, I also want more freedom of speech, and they're talking about the removal of trans people from protected classes, so they have the right to discriminate against them. I want to work together on solutions, and if we have a solution in mind, Medicare for all, unionization, I will work with anyone. I will work with anybody from any side of any aisle if they have an authentic desire to achieve something which I agree with, as long as I'm not, I don't know, giving them the crown to the monarchy or whatever, like, oh, hey, get me in power and we'll do unions. Like, okay, all right, sure, buddy. But yeah, I'm willing to work together on that. I'm a big, big, big fan of meaningful bipartisanship when it's sufficiently principled, I think.
Yeah, Bernie and Mike Lee on the Yemen genocide. That's the perfect example.
Yeah, or AOC and Ted Cruz. What was the thing that they got together on about a year ago?
Was it
before they started?
Was it some anti-monopoly thing? Some breaking up big companies?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what
was.
Was
that it? I don't remember. But yeah.
But I respect that. I respect the hell out of that. And that's why, because when you agree on a problem, there are a million solutions to any potential problem. You have no idea where people are going to go with this. You have a problem with woke culture. Plenty of people have a problem with cancel culture. What does that mean? What are we doing? Solutions. Okay, I can get behind these.
Yeah.
Woke culture
so
is when you
Vaush,
don't
I'm
sleep
told
enough.
That you've said some not very nice things about me and are not a big fan of Rising. I'll be honest with you, I haven't actually watched, so I'm going to assume everything was said in like good faith and substantive, etc. I can't watch.
Why'd you assume that?
Too much of a fragile special snowflake to actually watch. But tell me in your own words, like, what was your issue with Rising, with me working with Sagar? Like, lay that out for me.
So I won't speak ill of Sagar because I don't want to put you in a position where you have to defend like a coworker
Yeah.
in front of me, because I think that's a
Well,
really
listen,
stupid
Sagar has plenty of cringe views
Yeah,
that I'm
she
happy
won't.
to tell him
She
to,
won't
to
defend
his
him.
face,
No.
so go ahead.
No, okay. Well, I know because I've been put in that position, like, oh, you have to defend your friends, whatever. So I'll say this much: I've seen a lot of your solo content the past couple of months, and I find it generally extremely agreeable. I think that you have a very specific intention when you do your work on Rising, when you work with Sagar, right? And it's to convince people fundamentally that the Democratic Party is bad. This is a noble goal, okay? It's one that I agree with. And it's one that I think that you are very effective in delivering in many instances as well, because some of the blatant hypocrisies of the Democratic Party, I feel like it can be very difficult to call them out unless you're willing to go like full hog on it. You know what I mean? Going the full hog. You really go into it, and I respect the hell out of that. Sometimes I feel like these criticisms, they implicitly downplay the threat of the Republican Party, which works sometimes as a rhetorical strategy. Because again, the more afraid people are of the Republican Party, the more likely they are to accept anything the Democratic Party will give them. So you need to do that to an extent, but at the same time, I disagreed with the extent to which you seem to at some points. One of the big examples being the January 6th Capitol riots. Now, did I think this was going to like overthrow the U.S.? No, God no. Like the crazies invading the building, whatever. The main threat I thought was the normalization of the January 6th Capitol riots by basically the entire Republican Party. Like that time they normalize it, sure. Next time, maybe a couple Democratic senators take a cap through the forehead when they stand too close to an open window, and then we start seeing those justifications. Eventually, we start talking about, beer hall putsches, which is what I'm trying to stay away from.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you misread my intention though a little bit. And I also would say, like, I think if you watch my coverage or our coverage of January 6th, I would certainly let Sagar speak for himself, but I was certainly as like appalled and condemning as you possibly could be of that particular event. More of my intention with Rising and the work that I'm doing with Sagar, which you probably know, like we just did our last Rising, but we have new things coming, so it's not like my partnership with Sagar is ending.
Best of luck.
Well, thank you. More of the intention is right now, I feel, and you can tell me if you think that this is correct, that the country is splitting along sectarian lines in a way that is really, I think, very troubling and maybe one of, in my views, the biggest problems that the country faces. Now, as Kyle said, in terms of like elected leaders or thought leaders in Washington who are populist, right? No, it's a total fraud. But do I know from working in West Virginia and growing up in rural Virginia and living in Kentucky, living in the Rust Belt in Ohio, do I know that there are people there who have economic views that we could very much work with, who are very mistrustful of the establishments of both party, who could potentially be brought into a true, actual multiracial working class coalition? Yeah, I believe in that. And so the project of Rising and in working with Sagar in general is more in finding ways where we can actually have regular people view each other not as the enemy, recognizing that actually your adversary is the people who are holding power, who are keeping the status quo system in place, versus like if you go on Tucker, if you watch what Tucker does, he's saying like you need to be afraid of your neighbor. Your neighbor is an existential threat.
Yeah, and he does culture war bullshit
and
all the time.
And you see a lot of that coming from plenty of, mainline Democrats as well, of like, these people are different, they're evil, they want to destroy they're fascist, they're all racist, all of them are irredeemable. And are there racists who voted for Donald? Of course, yeah. Are there plenty of people with like bad views? 100, yeah, sure. But to dismiss the entire half of the country as like, those are evil, bad, irredeemable people, I think that leads the country in a very bad place. So I think maybe some of the criticism of Sagar and I that I've really reflected on and that I used to kind of like object to is this idea that maybe we emphasize our commonalities too much. But as I've reflected on that, no, that's actually intentional, because we get people who have watched us truly across the entire ideological spectrum who come to us and routinely say like, it's a right-wing.
Oh yeah, the January 6th riots. You don't want people to look at it and say, oh, these are crazy Trump supporters. You know what kind of people support Trump. You do not want people talking about it in that way. And it really wasn't that way. It came as a result of Donald Trump. These people were manipulated and sold a lie about reality. They believe in an alternate reality because of their reality TV show TV star. Or reality TV star, whatever. Like, that should be the conversation. It's Trump.
Spectrum,
it is him.
Come to us and routinely say,
it's not
like,
because some white people are,
person,
poor white people are
still
dumb, or
and
rural white
come
people, or suburban
like,
white.
Oh, so this person in my life.
Even the white nationalism conversation, I don't want it to be focused around that. It should be focused around like why Trump attracts people who believe in white nationalism. It should always be brought back to the demagogue, at least when you're talking to people.
different politics than me. They're not
For
the
like actual systemic evaluations, then you got to go a lot deeper, obviously, into white nationalism and the history of racism in America and how that plays into the culture war and
who
nationalism and
come
all
to
that
us and
stuff. But
routinely say like, it's a right-wing person, but they still respect me, and they come to realize like, oh, so this person in my life who has very different politics than me, they're not the enemy. We're able to talk about politics again. We don't hate each other. We've been able to heal those relationships. So that's actually more of the intent of the show than just like making people think that the Democratic Party is bad, which I'm also happy to, I gave Biden a lot of credit when he did the vaccine, like the patent protection, and said, hey, we shouldn't do that, even though I'm waiting for follow-up on that. So where they do good things, I try to give them credit. And it's really not the core of what I'm all about, to convince people that the Democratic Party is like uniquely evil.
Okay, I think that's a completely fair rebuttal. The
look
thing
at
you
that
said
shot.
about
Beautiful.
like don't demonize your neighbor, I
Missed
think is
it.
extremely
Get in
important
there.
because
Hell
one of the
yeah.
biggest problems that we have that I have, I get, because I debate a lot of people. I bring people on all the time. Hundreds of people at this point now I've talked to, and one of the biggest things I notice from Republicans is a sense of insecurity. And I don't mean that in like a haha, like you're a beta male or whatever type way. I mean that in a feeling that the culture is leaving them behind and they are preemptively despised by basically every institution in this country, from
Right.
Hollywood to the mainstream news to the Democratic voters, which outnumber them. And that if they're going to be despised, they might as well stop caring about what they want anyway. And I think that's a very destructive, in every way, a very destructive process.
Oh yeah, I agree, JKRT. I like Crystal Ball a lot more after watching this and hearing her talk without Sagar and without that TV show.
Politically. At the end of the day, I mean, we're all sociological agents. There's nothing inherently leftist about me. If I was born to a different set of parents, I probably could have been a conservative or a moderate Democrat or a neo-Nazi or a Ku Klux Klaner. We're all very well molded by our environments. And to condemn people morally for the misfortune of having been born into circumstances which maybe led them down an ideological path I disagree with, it doesn't do anything. The condemnation is meaningless.
I also think there's a very selective form of forgiveness that can exist on the left. Like, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I'm opposed to the mass incarceration state that we have. I think people who, have served their time should be able to re-enter society and have full and productive lives. I think they should be able to vote. I think they should be able to pray.
What's
And
up,
that's like,
Nick?
I think everybody on
you.
the left would basically
I
agree with that.
appreciate it.
But then there are other areas where if you, say or do the wrong thing or hold the wrong view, we're done with you, right? There's no coming back. You're not allowed back in the circle. And that's something I really disagree with. And I'll be honest with you, Vaush, like, especially back during the protest movement over the summer, it was tense at times between Sagar and I. And that was probably the most difficult period of the show, because both of us had very strongly held views that did not line up whatsoever. And so I did some soul searching at that point of like, what am I doing? Is this sustainable? Is this good? And I guess what I really came back to is Sagar is, and you don't know him personally, so you don't have insight to seeing this, but Sagar is as good faith an actor and as honest an actor and as good of a partner as he could possibly be. So I was like, if I can't even talk to Sagar, like, we're fucked as a country. Like, here he is. He agrees with me on like 70% of things and is just.
I actually heard Sagar talking, and it kind of made me question how I evaluate people. Do I think some people are malicious in their intent, or do I think they have major flaws and simply see the world in a really disagreeable way to mine? Because Sagar was talking about like how he left the corporate Republican world once he disagreed that the election was stolen. Like, Sagar and Krystal covered the election really responsibly. More responsibly, I think, than pretty much anybody. They did a great job of doing that. And it made me question, like, okay, Sagar, I know Vaush convinced me that Sagar is a Nazi, but maybe he just has a couple things I really disagree with, and he sees the world in a way that I think is kind of dumb. He doesn't need to be an evil whatever for me to disagree with him. He could be a decent guy and not be crazy, and we could just disagree on things. I don't know, on a couple things. Because covering the election in a way that both loses you the QAnon crowd, the Trumpist crowd, and also the corporate Republican crowd, covering the election in that way, I can respect that.
Like, trusts me and believes in my good intentions and really wants to hear me out and see my point. Like, if I can't handle
Would I get
that
interviewed by
debate
Crystal
with this
Ball?
person,
Yeah, in
then
my
how can
dreams.
we expect anyone in the country to be able to like have a reasonable partnership
was
or debate with
promised
anyone?
that
Can I jump in
could.
Can
on
I
that super
interject
quick?
for a sec? Just
Okay.
sorry, real quick. I want to
Yeah,
hop
of
in real
course.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. She covered the election in a decent way, but she might just be dumb in some areas. I don't think she's a bad actor though.
The reason
I
why
don't
you
think
felt
she's
that at that
evil or
particular
like a
time is
Nazi or
because the
whatever.
view that
Like,
he was espousing,
I don't know.
you thought was not within the bounds of respectable discourse. And I actually agree with you on that because his whole argument was like, yeah, bring in the army to like crack down domestically on protesters. That's deeply against the First Amendment. That's deeply authoritarian. You viewed that as outside of the bounds of reason. And some other times when he disagrees with you, you might not think it's outside the bounds of
Yeah.
reason, like on the issue of guns or maybe on the issue of abortion or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You might think, yeah,
We
I don't
just don't
agree
talk
with
about
you,
those
but I
issues.
see it.
Yeah.
But this was one where you're like, no, not only do I not agree with you, I don't even see your point, and I think you're like actively hostile.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it was very difficult. But that gets to the more important point is, and this happens with discourse all the time, where are your actual red lines where you're like, hey, if you believe this, I can't even be friends with you. You know, if somebody's pro-genocide, you're not going to be like, well, we just disagree. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So like there are red lines, but then there's other things that you might disagree, but they're not red lines. So I
Right.
think that's why it was hard for you at that point. in time.
And just to add to that, and then I want to hear what you have to say, Vaush, is like, yeah, that's exactly why.
Yeah.
But then it also is the case that there's a large portion of Americans who
Well, I
agree
think
with
that
his
was-
views.
that's why
which
you
is
stayed,
what
I
was
think.
like so uncomfortable about the whole
We
situation.
saw like 70%. There was a poll that was like 70% or something agree with deploying the military in U.S. streets. And so you were like, I guess if it's 70% of the country, I have to argue against this position, basically,
Yeah.
was your point. Anyway, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead,
Vaush.
Vaush.
We just
No,
stole.
I run into that all the time. I am frequently disappointed with the popularity of some of the
No.
positions that people. Sometimes I argue against a position online, and I think nobody actually believes this. I'm wasting my time. This is some
Tell
always
the
online
scandal.
bullshit.
Talk about the scandal that just happened.
No,
everybody-
no. Wait, hold on.
What scandal?
Maybe in a
Oh.
second. Okay, hold on. We just poured water on that fire. So a couple things. First of all, again, I don't like arguing
I'm
against
so
people who
bad.
aren't here. So I'll just say I cordially invite Sagar to an arm wrestle anytime. We have we can keep it to that. You know, it's good. I've been working out lately. I think I can do it. You know, I'm feeling strong.
He's been hitting the Peloton hard during quarantine. I don't know, Vaush.
All right. Hey, you know what? I invite the challenge. One of the issues I have, because this is kind of the problem I have with right populism, it feels like every discussion I have with the right populist is like we agree for 40 minutes. Yeah, the establishment is bad. Workers in this country are being oppressed. Yeah, the media
No.
is like an oligarchy that's being used to distract people from meaningful issues. And then they get caught on some culture war talking point and instantly swap into fascism, like in a nanosecond. Like I can spend all this time agreeing with them at a point, and then it'll be like, oh yeah, but Black Lives Matter is burning cities down, so we have to revoke citizenship and deport people and use like Secret Service black bags to take protesters away and interrogate them to find out which anarchist cells are ruling there. These are, so again, we're not talking Sagar. I've had convos with people like this,
Yeah.
but it's a thing I've noticed too. Same with trans issues too. People will agree on like everything. Like, yeah, you know, I think workers need more rights. I think the Republican Party has gone crazy. I think et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, trans women using the same bathroom as my daughter, I don't know. So I'm going to abandon every other position I've just
bad.
spent the past 40 minutes agreeing with you on and vote Republican because I'm that in favor of whatever meaningless virtue signal anti-civil rights bills they're going to pass that'll last 3 years before they get overturned and the whole country moves on from this. And that's a pattern that I've noticed. And I don't know how much being anti-establishment means if you're willing to drop all of it
Right.
over a culture war issue. Because
So
like,
I'm
let me
so
ask you this,
bad.
Josh. Do you see the populist right as sort of a unique threat, or do you put them in the same bucket as like neocons and these like David Frum, like George W. Bush apologists, and the mainline Democrats who are just basically shilling for capital? Like, do you see them as sort of a unique threat on the horizon? Since you made the point of like linking back to the most successful ones were Nazis, is that an accurate reflection of your views?
Yeah, they are a unique threat, at least to my values, like, you know, for what I respect, because nobody can make convincing arguments for establishment politics in the mainstream discourse anymore. Every year, every minute of every day, more people are pulled to a fringe position. It's just the world we live in right now. The right or the left, somewhere, someone gets pulled to the fringe every minute, probably quite a few per minute. And there's something I say, it's called the Nazbol vortex, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek term that a lot of other people use now, so I guess it's caught on. I don't like that, but the idea is that I'm very worried that as the fact that workers in this country are being exploited becomes more and more obvious to people are going to start wondering, what can we do about this? And there will be a group of people who will say the following. They will say, you can have your workers' paradise. You can have a welfare state. You can have Social Security. You can have all of it. The only thing you need to do is drop the woke bullshit, which in practice means stop advocating Black Lives Matter, stop advocating for trans rights, stop advocating for this and for that. And the problem with that is that I've noticed that's a very compelling argument to a lot of people, even minorities. I've seen gay, trans, Black, whatever people drop progressive positions because they thought advocacy for those positions was impeding workers' rights. And that is, now historically, you can take a look at that proposition and say, this is a flat out lie. The most successful workers' rights orgs have always been a multiracial alliance of people advocating for the cutting edge of civil rights at their time. That's always been the case for a number of reasons, but it's a compelling line. And populist right type.
Yo, I like this teammate a lot. I love this teammate. Look at this pass and
That's
finish.
always been the case for a
Yeah.
number of reasons, but it's a compelling line. And populist right types, whether they sincerely believe in it, as some people I've talked to do, or don't, like Tucker Carlson, are really good at selling that line. I mean, Tucker Carlson says something to that effect all the time, doesn't he? You know, the elites are controlling this country, and how do they do it? Through cheap labor they get through immigration. So all we have to do is close the borders, et cetera, et cetera. He recently said, for God's sake, he said that the what was it, the 1964 immigration bill, the Hart-Celler Act, that was like the greatest threat to American values. Most listened to television broadcaster said the immigration bill that led to non-whites being allowed into this country in a greater number, that was the greatest threat our country's ever faced to our values. That's mainstream now. And
Yeah.
that is going to get more popular with time. That's what I'm afraid of.
So, okay, there's a bunch of things to say in response to that. Again, I would say Tucker's not a populist, so he's a fraud. He's a fake. He's just a
But
just
he is a
standard Republican.
populist.
So I have nothing but disdain for
He
Tucker.
is a populist.
And
Populism
anybody
is
who's,
as
again, at the
dangerous.
national level,
That's the thing. Tucker Carlson is a populist. He's not a fake populist. Populism is a dangerous tool that needs to be used responsibly, or it can go in the wrong direction pretty easily. He is a populist. 100%. Hitler was a populist. Mussolini was a populist. FDR was a populist. Those three people were not the same brand of populist, though.
Republican. So I have nothing but disdain for Tucker, and anybody who's, again, at the national level, a politician who does the populist tap dance, but doesn't actually, like Josh Hawley pretended to be a populist. He was against the $15 minimum wage. Don't tell me you're a fucking populist if you don't support a $15 minimum wage. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Pro right
So
to
again,
work. Yeah.
but I think there's a difference between fraud populist and somebody who actually was a 2 times Obama voter who flipped to Trump and they say, hey, it's because I wanted to keep my job, or somebody like Sagar who might be genuine in saying, I want a $15 minimum wage, or I want more unionization, or I want whatever. And you mentioned wokeness there for a second. See, I make a distinction, Vaush, between the left position on social issues, which I down the line pretty much agree with. So, you know, you talk about trans rights, 100% pro-trans rights. Use whatever bathroom you want to use, all that stuff. And if you go social issue for social issue, I bet you and I are 95 to 100% in agreement on those things. But that's not wokeness. Well, I think wokeness is a pejorative term, because wokeness, to sum it up, is like when the left starts using authoritarian tactics, so they want to like silence people or deplatform people or what have you. And I am against that. I am against wokeness. I am against like shutting people down if they say something that's rude or bad or even bigoted, because I think we should believe in free speech as a principle. So tell me the difference. Do you agree that there's a distinction there between wokeness and being left on social issues? Because it seems like you conflated the two things there.
No, I just want to say, I think there's a difference. Well, I mean, it's all a language game, right? For me, I spend a ton of time arguing with the left. I think there are plenty of ways in which the progressive left irresponsibly advocates for progressive positions, but the right does not make a distinction between these things. When you hear like woke...
Well, okay, yeah. FDR was in a position where he could have done damage if he was a bad person. He did have a lot of appeal. He used mass media the most effectively as it was used in that time, obviously. He was really good at what he did through wartime, very nationalistic, very authoritarian. But we are lucky that FDR happened to have principles and care about democracy and freedom and civil rights and all that stuff, civil liberties. We got lucky with FDR, I'll be honest. If at that time a white nationalist won, we might live in a very different world today.
It's all a language game, right? For me, I spend a ton
White
of time arguing with the
nationalists won in
left. I think there are
America.
plenty of ways in which the progressive left irresponsibly advocates for progressive positions, but the right does not make a distinction between these things. When you hear like woke nonsense from
Right, yeah,
like,
that's what they mean.
Right. They mean anything progressive. They mean Black Lives Matter. They mean trans rights. If you go back far enough, I guarantee you these people would start advocating for gay marriage to be revoked. Well, actually, that's the official position of every single state Republican Party. Revoke gay marriage. That's still in every single one of their proposed like ideas and charters. That's what they mean by woke nonsense. And
Bring that up to people, by the way. Everybody who votes Republican and anybody in the middle, make sure you show them that big map. Every Republican Party, actually, no, 90%, I think 90% of Republican parties in our country, so 90% of states, they are still openly against gay marriage. Still to this day, nobody even talks about it.
Of irresponsible behavior on the left is an intra-leftist discourse, something we have to discuss amongst ourselves. But if we let them co-opt those criticisms, pretty soon I'll say, like, I don't like this woke nonsense, I don't like cancel culture, and somebody to my left will agree, somebody next to me will say, oh, I completely agree. I hate that we have to call trans women she, her, or whatever.
Right, okay, I see your point. I got you.
Yeah, so I apologize for my misspeaking there.
No,
when I was talking about sincere versus fake populist as well, to me, I agree there's a difference. It's just like, if the rhetoric overlaps, at the end of the day, the consequences are the same, regardless of how sincere
rhetoric.
Their advocacy for it is, which is super frustrating because, like, I mean, you say Tucker Carlson's a fraud. I think it's really obvious, but a lot of people think that guy is like the, you know.
They do. They do.
I'm sorry, Krystal.
I was just going to get your thoughts, Vaush, on the kind of other, you were talking about it from the right perspective where they'll say, yeah, this woke nonsense, and they'll mean the content as well. Whereas my issue is oftentimes liberals or, the CIA video thing that I know you and Kyle are going back and forth over, like, these institutions will cloak themselves in the language of wokeness without having any of the content. So it's exactly the opposite of the right is against the language and they're against the content. Then you'll have these institutions of power that'll embrace the language and strip it of all of its content and use it to virtue say and convince you they're good people, they're on your side, they're progressive, et cetera, et cetera. That to me is also extremely dangerous.
Yeah, they're tap dancing, and oh my God, that CIA ad. Because I mean, we all know what the CIA does, what they've done for civil rights abroad. Okay, the idea that this organization could get away with passing itself off as some sort of woke, we have an immigrant mother of whatever, we have this person who works here, is disgusting.
Generalized anxiety disorder who hates the patriarchy.
I'm a cisgender millennial. Fucking kill me, man. Oh God, it's like they knew they were shitting in my cornflakes when they. So corporations and big institutions will always cynically use like identity politics to push whatever brand they're doing. When Gillette did that like masculinity commercial, when Nike did all their Black Lives Matter advocacy, their work with Colin Kaepernick, when all these corps, we know why they do it. They do it
kneeling in front of a bank vault. Yes, that was one of my favorite examples.
Money. And right now, more people agree with those positions than the opposite, or at the very least, the discourse generated by the controversy leads to a lot of sales. So it's something they're going to do to make money no matter what. But this has always happened. What about all those no Irish need apply signs? What about all those horrible signs people used to post out their stores saying, we don't provide service to Jews and, Black people? That was the exact same thing. Admittedly, they didn't have mass media, to promote that message through. But I guarantee you that if we had the internet and mass media in 1930s, you would see corporations virtue signaling that they're not on the side of the suffragettes or whatever. They will always cater to the popular opinion to make money. And we have to criticize them for that. But we cannot let people on the right get away with acting like this is some sort of sincere advocacy for these positions. Right. When a corporation puts up a BLM advert, this is not an indication of institutional power backing BLM, okay? No more so than like a porn site having tits on its main page is institutional support for women. It's a way of using the aesthetic in order to garner clicks, and that's it. And you can criticize that, and that's fine. But you have to criticize it without criticizing the content that they're trying to cynically,
right. But I think my critique goes a little bit further, which is that sometimes on the left, the language itself is like it's used in a way where if you're not using the right lingo and not using the right language, even if you do actually agree with at least some of the content or could be moved on the content, there's a sense of disdain or there's the attempt to censor, to push people out who aren't using the right language. And to me, it can make the whole project feel very insular, very sort of condescending. Yeah. Again, even with people who may be able to be moved to all of the content or maybe mostly there on the content, but still are pushed aside like, oh, you don't get it, you're not with us, you're not using the right lingo. And that's the other part so I see some of the more insular language as being off-putting for the project of sort of building a larger coalition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost unworkable. It's worse online. It's better in real life, like, with IRL advocacy orgs, but it's a real problem. Yeah. It's the left circular firing squad, right? The problem is the right is so good at falling in line, the whole Republican establishment fell in line to lap at Trump's feet the moment he won. Even the people, he attacked Ted Cruz's wife. There were people who said he was like a plague in the Republican Party. They all fell in line, every one of them. I don't know what it is about them, but they sure do like being lapdogs. On the left, our independent and free spirits lead to us being a bunch of infighting cats 90% of the time. And I agree with your, I agree too, because I think there are a lot of ways, a lot of rhetorical methods by which you can advocate for a good position. That's what I tried to do when I started this channel, because I know the way I talk. Well, it's not the way that a lot of people on the left talk online. At least I'm trying to touch on a different element, a different aesthetic there. But people attack me for that sometimes, even when they agree with the content of my speech. It's incredibly frustrating, and I can only say that I agree with that. It's a real problem. I'm hoping, it seems like the left drops this in times of excitement, like around election years or when there's a really, really big, like when the George Floyd protests start, like right after his murder. I feel like for a couple of weeks, there was almost no infighting on the left. Everybody agreed what happened was wrong, and it's time for a discussion.
Well, Andrew Yang on BDS too, that united everybody. Or Andrew Yang on Israel. Everybody was like, "Fuck you."
Well, I actually thought in general on Israel and Gaza, there was a lot of.
Everybody came together. Yeah, everybody came together.
That was nice of you. I really appreciate Yang doing that, And hey, that's how I felt with the Palestinian fundraiser. There were a couple of lunatics who said like, oh, you're donating to Hamas. And I still invite anyone who believes that to provide evidence of it, because I was very careful when choosing my donations. But for the most part, people, got together on that. Even people who I saw like they disliked me online, they said, okay, this is a good thing. That's really sweet. We all have a capacity to work together towards goals we believe in, whether these people are on the left or on the right. And I think that's a muscle that we all need to exercise, our ability to work across the aisle, as not in some Biden way, by the way, like, oh, let's defer to the Republicans, but towards a genuine shared goal.
Or like,
So-
oh, let's work together for another war tax
So-
cut or whatever.
Vaush, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I want to tell Krystal doesn't know the thing that was just a scandal that you were involved in. I want to tell her to get her
I
live
caught
reaction.
a little bit of a whiff of it, but I want the full breakdown.
Okay,
yeah.
here's the bottom line.
I'm not a very
Vaush-
online person, is the
Vaush-
truth of the matter. Yeah.
Let me
he
give my bottom
basically
line
said-
after your bottom line. Good luck.
I'm going to sum it up, and then Vaush, you could tell me if I'm wrong in any part of it. But the gist of it is, Vaush basically said, hey, don't have kink at Pride.
Okay.
So in other words, don't have a big ass dildo thing
He said, like,
or
make
whatever.
it family friendly.
Yeah, make Pride family friendly, and for that he was totally dragged because people were like, you can't police, the LGBTQ community. By the way, he's pansexual. He's pansexual. He's part of the LGBTQ
If I had
community.
known that was your problematic view, there's no way I would have invited you on today. So you just barely skated by with that.
Thanks for keeping it covert, Kyle. Saving it for the hurdle there. No, it's okay. Wait, I want to. Oh God, I just poured water. Okay, I just poured water on this. I just want to say, okay. The initial live stream where I talked about this, I got super angry at some people in chat were being really, really dumb. So I probably did a bad job initially conveying the point. But my general argument is like, okay, Pride isn't a riot anymore in most parts of America. There are lots of big cities where it's actually like a well-incorporated, well-planned big event that lots of people can attend. And I think it'd be nice if like maybe the main event or like a big portion of it, like a big segment, was family friendly. Because I know, because I have a lot of kids in my audience, there were a lot of young like gay or trans people who don't have any gay or trans friends, any connections, any knowledge, any info, any contacts, whatever. And they want to go to Pride, but they can't really because their parents won't want to go because there's this stigma of it being like overtly sexual with people running around with like dildos or gimp suits or whatever. And I said, I think it's just like have like a big part of Pride, just be family friendly. Like I don't mean you can't walk around shirtless or whatever, like it's a beach or I just mean just chill it for like one part of it, And the problem is a lot of people interpreted this as me trying to like destroy the legacy of kink and its integration at Pride, which I have no problem, by the way, with people being kinky as shit at Pride. I just want there to be like a good part of it where kids can just go and it's not controversial and it's the discourse lasted for days. I lost thousands of subs.
I'm surprised by that last part. I'm surprised you lost subs.
Did he really lose subs?
I mean, let me play devil's advocate for a second. I think the argument they would make, but it's hard for me to play devil's advocate because I agreed with what your rebuttal was. But they would argue like, who are you to tell these consenting people that they can't be free adults in the context of this parade? And your rebuttal was basically something along the lines of like, other people are not consenting for you to, whatever, show everybody your dick or your balls or your pussy or whatever, run around with a dildo on your head. Like, so
find kinky people watching. One of the first things you learn about kink is that everyone involved should consent, even if it's if it's a public event, everyone involved should consent because maybe you don't want to see somebody running around jacking off or whatever. This is fairly standard stuff. Now, people aren't running around jacking off at Pride. Now to steelman the opposition's position, I think a lot of people on the left get very sensitive when they hear criticisms of the LGBTQ community that overlap with conservative criticisms. So when I said I feel like some portion should be family friendly, in their minds, family friendly means like straight, like don't act gay, keep it in line, homos, And to be fair, conservative moms that I knew growing up would use family friendly as a synonym for keep that gay shit away from my child. So you're the worst interpretation of my statement, and then they think I'm like operating from within the queer community to try to like make it all like straight and sanitized. And I'll say this, last thing I'll say, I get their frustration and I get their reflexive defensiveness, but oh my God, did that discourse get crazy quick, and I did not enjoy it.
There's no charitability. No, Vaush, that's the thing that drives me crazy is that you've been doing very clear, really good left-wing content for a long time, and there was zero credibility. They treated you like you're fucking Ted Haggard or some shit. You're some hardcore right-wing preacher who said it. It's like, no, look at the context of this shit.
I just have a hard time in that. Like, you said you lost thousands of subscribers. Were you just making a joke, or is that true?
Oh, that's true.
Oh, see, that's just crazy. Like, they love your work, and then to just not cut you any slack of like, I think he's operating in good faith. I just don't understand.
I'll win him back with the Krystal Kyle good faith discourse is what I'll try to do.
There you go. There you go.
There were ways I could have improved my language, but you are right. The lack of charitability is a real problem. It affects pretty much every element of this. It's almost impossible to get people on the left to work behind like a big political movement because there's always going to be some fracturing or splintering over some perceived problematic elements within that. And God, the right never does that, man. The right backed Roy Moore after they found out he was a pedo. Like the right would just charge forward with no care at all. Which I mean, I'm not saying we should back people who are pedos. I'm just saying that we could maybe be a little bit more amicable to working with people we disagree with.
Totally. And, I just saw this morning, there were two prominent left-wing figures. I won't name names now, but people could probably piece it together. Two, like, relatively prominent left-wing figures going right at each other's jugulars. You're owned by this, you're bought by that. And neither one of them is bought. And I look at it and it drives me fucking crazy. I could tell you off air who it was, but I'm not gonna tell you now.
Demon
Anyway,
Model versus Vaush.
so I have one more. This is one more area where we disagree. I'm curious to see you lay out your thoughts on it. I actually was a supporter of Force the Vote. Put Jimmy Dore aside. The idea
Force
of
the vote,
forcing a vote
no.
on Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic strikes me as intuitively intelligent. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Why would I need to? You
Oh,
already
give
said put
me
aside
this
Jimmy Dore.
debate, baby.
So
Vaush
do
makes.
I think the force the vote
doesn't he make a
strategy
bad
would work?
argument here?
Not really.
I heard he
Maybe is
does-
it worth some
I
discussion?
saw a
Maybe,
clip.
yeah. I don't
He does
know.
bad
It
here.
seems like an interesting idea.
Oh,
My
he's going
issue
all
was the
baby on
people,
it.
and it wasn't just Jimmy. There were a lot of others who used the force the vote as some kind of litmus test for whether you're a real progressive, and then they played up this big
Weak,
show.
Vaush,
Everyone who
weak,
didn't go along
very
with their
weak.
plans was some sort of traitor. Like, I mean, so I say I'm not going to shit talk people who aren't here. I'll shit talk Jimmy Dore any day. So like this, here's what the guy did. Okay, not
That's not
only
the
did he
good
do this force
argument.
the vote thing, he then started a panel
Jimmy
and a
Dore has a bad
conference where he
attitude.
invited AOC performatively, knowing she wouldn't show up, condemned her for not showing up, saying she was ignoring the will of the people by not showing up to his show to make him money, and then said anyone who didn't support Force the Vote was a fraud and a traitor to the Democratic Party, held a conference that went past the last day they could have forced the vote. It was never about Force the Vote. It was about trying to pull off disaffected progressive Democrats and add them to Jimmy's community. And there were other people who tried that too. For these people, I have no respect. They are doing the exact thing that we all just condemned here, which is the fragmentation, the splintering. But at least when crazy leftists on Twitter fragment and splinter, they do it because they have a sincere belief in what they're
Yeah,
advocating
he's
for. There's a
criticizing
disagreement that they can't get over because I
Kyle's
don't know, they're
good
sensitive
friend.
or whatever. But that was pure cynical
Taking a
garbage. I
chance
have no
here.
respect for it. The strategy itself, defensible, and maybe in a better context or environment, maybe I would have supported it too.
And Jimmy
So
Dore.
let me break this down in response. One of the criticisms I had of Force the Vote is that yes, it was the case that if people didn't immediately agree, they were accused of being sellouts, they were
Corrupt.
accused of being corrupt, and I was if any segment I did on Force the Vote, I was very clear up front that there's no reason to malign somebody's intentions if you don't have a reason to malign somebody's intentions. So like Noam Chomsky was against Force the Vote. Does that mean Noam Chomsky is some sort of evil sellout villain
They
who's
say
twisting his evil
that. They
mustache?
do say that. Yeah, they do.
So anyway, my point is on that point, I totally agree, and I don't question the intentions and the motives of well-meaning people who just didn't agree with the strategy, for sure. But there was this other problem that every time you bring up the issue itself,
Rob,
the
stop
conversation
being so
always goes immediately
sensitive.
back
Calm
to,
down, my
isn't
bad,
Jimmy
my
Dore an
bud.
asshole? Isn't he so abrasive?
My
Doesn't he have
friend,
all these
my
problems?
amigo.
And even if I grant you all that, the idea on its merits, when you hear the arguments fleshed out, it makes perfect sense. I mean, for example, when it comes to women's suffrage, it failed in the House of Representatives in 1915. It failed as an amendment in 1918. It failed again as an amendment in 1919. And then in 1920, we got women's suffrage. So, like, something losing is not necessarily a setback. If anything, what you can do is fire everybody up when they see that our fucking corrupt representatives just voted against universal health care in the middle of a pandemic. And I think what was so frustrating to Jimmy is that he thinks he's doing this thing which is super noble and he's lighting the spark that's going to set the fire, that's really going to take it to the establishment and get us health care. And then for like half or more than half of the left to turn around and be like, fuck off because you're Jimmy. I could see why he was upset by it.
My lawyers are informing me not to say anything more about Jimmy Dore. So
Dude, I miss all these Force the Vote debates. Those were my favorite. That was my favorite moment of my channel. My channel short history. That's my favorite ever.
I'll set it there. I'll say this though, like I think you can give a 50-50 on the arguments. On one hand, you can rile people up by doing this performative, because of course it's performative. It's not going to actually go through. So, but you can rile people up like optically with that move. The counter argument, I guess, would be the idea that it would make progressives look bad to like visibly block a part of the democratic process. Now, in actuality, are they blocking it? No, not really. But optically, could it be played that way? Yes,
Yeah.
by the media to play up that process, and maybe like the media would go like, "Oh, progressives
No.
wasting everyone's time. You lost the election, buddy. Come on." Maybe it could go either way. There are optical wins and failures potential. One of the frustrations I had is when I talked to Force the Vote types, they wouldn't even acknowledge the potential downsides. I guess I just get really frustrated when it feels like I'm having an argument with a demagogue. If a person can say like, "Hey, I recognize the downsides of this and the upsides. All that considered, I disagree with your assessment," and I would go with like the upsides. I think it's going to work out. I respect the hell out of that. I feel like if that was the discourse, that would have been great. If the discourse was you, Kyle, that would have been great. But it was so dominated by bad faith actors. And maybe that's like the problem, right? Maybe that's what happened with me just yesterday as well. It can be almost impossible to have a good faith conversation with a bad faith one playing in the background, because it's really easy to just let that attitude corrupt the way you're handling the discourse. It's really tough. I don't know.
I really don't think that that I think they genuinely meant it and wanted it, and then they got very defensive the second there was any opposition. And listen, you have to be willing to hear the opposition and explain why you're right and the opposition is wrong. So on that front, they didn't do well, and on the fact that they called everybody and their mother a sellout, they didn't do well. But the core of it and the heart of it, I think they meant well, and I think they really wanted to get people healthcare. And listen, I don't think it looks bad. I mean, the media is going to shit on us no matter what. Like, I'll grant you that. No matter what, the media is always going to shit on the left. That's what they do. But like, I don't think it looks bad to push for civil rights in 1960. I don't think it looks bad to push for universal healthcare in 2021 if we don't get it until, let's say, 2027 or whatever it might be. So, I mean, I always fall back
Kyle conveniently ignores everything about Democratic voters today, and he keeps on bringing up appeals to civil rights, ignoring all the current facts.
on
Really
MLK
interesting.
quote, the time is always right to do what's right. So I will take a vote on any of my priorities.
Dude, like France and Russia in the beginning of the 1900s had an end of the 1800s, they had revolutions. Like, if we don't have a revolution right now to stop capitalism, then I think it looks bad to not do a revolution, because they actually stood up for their principles.
I mean, even if I know I'm going to lose, use that to try to get a spark, to get bodies in the streets, to try to get people to rally to our agenda. Because I think that you mentioned it earlier. I forgot the phrase that you used, but you said something like the raw aggression of the right or whatever. Like, yeah, that's why they win on a lot of the things they do, because they just dominate the conversation and bulldoze everybody in their sight. And then eventually people are like, all right, I get it. Fucking, we'll do the thing that you want to do. I'm sorry, Krystal.
Well, I was just going to add to that, which is that, it's all counter. We don't know what the alternate history would be, but it's been very easy to allow healthcare to fall off the agenda entirely.
Yeah, we're not even talking about public option anymore.
Public option is not in budgets, in Biden's budget. Even the prescription drug thing, gone. Lowering the Medicare age, progressives are like writing another strongly worded letter or something about it. But, you can easily imagine.
Good point, JKRT. The Amazon Union vote really did discourage people. Losing a vote isn't good if the public isn't already like heavily on your side. If it's something that's like a really fringe issue still, and you force a vote and get dominated, and you prove to Democratic voters that you don't have the political prowess or like power needed to actually get healthcare reform done, then you're losing so much opportunity for the future.
Where if there had been heat put around this issue during a pandemic, that at least would have forced them to have to consider consider doing something.
They should have forced the vote on a public option.
Oh my God, there's
This
people
was-
in the streets. Yeah.
They should have done
I
that.
completely accept the potential validity of the argument. I do think there's a potential for optical backlash, but there is absolutely no way for me to make a real informed decision on which whether the upside or the downside is potentially more significant or more likely.
Right.
I genuinely don't know. My concern was largely with the broader discourse. And to the broader point, by the way, since the force the vote thing is done and gone, I'll say this. I want progressives to be
I still think
extremely
the union
aggressive
vote
in
should have
advocating for this
happened,
from this point
but-
forward. I think the American public is, and this is only going to be
Unfortunate.
more the case with time too.
Maybe
I think
not.
the general
I don't
public
know.
is very
It did set the
amenable
movement back.
to pushing for beyond what Biden is advocating for right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Republicans are going to back pretty much. I think Republicans are actually, in many cases, willing to cede some credibility to progressive criticisms of Biden because they see Biden as the bigger threat. And I think that Democratic voters are probably easy to remind of the little treachery we got with the public option. As time goes on, I think we need to be more and more aggressive. And I just hope that we can channel that aggression in ways that doesn't cause a bunch of meaningless infighting on the left,
Let me ask you this, Vaush. You mentioned early on that you wanted to use your platform and do more
What a
organizing
horrible
in real
comparison.
life.
I have no
What do you
arguments.
see if we were going to organize
Do some
around
more
one
forced to vote
Biden era
debates.
priority? What is sort of
I'm
top
up
of your
for
list?
it.
Is it Medicare for all or public option? Is it the PRO Act? What do you think would be the most transformative thing that's within the realm of
some
possibility here?
Magical rhetorical
God,
tools.
that's a really tough. To just nail it down to one. If it's just one, momentum has to mean at the very least a public option. Because that seems like a fairly realistic, like an obvious hypocrisy to call them on. In terms of stuff that I'd love to see, though, like really hard points that we need to hit on, we can't forget about Gaza just because there was a ceasefire. We cannot let that go. Under no circumstances. The attack of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera building, and then Israel going, "Oh yeah, dude, we told Biden that there's Hamas there. It's okay."
Smoking
and then,
gun.
Yeah, and then
Trust me, bro.
The Secretary of State came out and said, "We didn't say anything." Biden admitting that he went soft on Netanyahu. Like we cannot let this go. We can't let that go. The public option's an easy get. I mean, obviously Medicare for all as well, but at the very least, a public option. And
JKRT or not JKRT. Don Shepard. Look at polling of Amazon. I couldn't pull it up then, but polling of Amazon workers, they're a lot more reluctant to even try to unionize now after that vote failed. They don't even want to try anymore after taking such a big defeat. Do you understand the pressure those workers went through for that vote? The entire movement just got really hurt by that. It was a big
And I
blow.
also
It
think we
really
need to talk
was.
way more about electoral reform. The Interstate National Compact, or whatever
Yeah.
it's called,
Yep.
that is getting closer and closer to being politically relevant. And
And that's
it's
They don't
popular
even
vote,
want,
just so everybody
like,
knows
they
that
don't
the
want
idea
to
behind
try
that is then
again.
the
No,
popular vote will determine the presidency.
yeah, and the constitutionality of that is
there's
probably
nothing
something
to
we're going
gain
to see a
from it.
ruling on
Like,
sometime in the next 4 years from the current
there's
court,
just
which
no
is not
reason to take
encouraging,
a
but we'll see how
chance
that
like
goes.
that if it has a
God, immigration reform is a
chance of
huge one. We
succeeding.
can't forget about the border, all the undocumented kids that are coming up in the systems, the infrastructure bill. I feel like we have so many ways to attack Biden here. We just have to keep our eye on all of them. And we can't let up. And the progressives in Congress can't let up either. Not to say they have to destroy their credibility by, like, any time they exhale, they have to mutter a curse upon Biden's family. But they need to be aggressive. They need to
So-
work with us.
So Vaush, my last question for you is a little weird, and you could take some time to think about it if you need it. But tell me your most unpopular opinion, or let me rephrase that. Maybe even tell me your most conservative opinion.
Oh,
The
God.
tactical
Give
N-word.
me a sec. Yeah, okay. My most
Can that be
conservative
it?
opinion. Let me think.
While you think about it, I'll answer just so
Guns.
you know, like you won't be the
Yeah,
only person
please.
showing your whole ass on this show right now. So I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I could talk about. I'm actually, when it comes to the nature versus nurture issue, most lefties tend to agree that nurture is the more dominant thing and more important. I actually disagree. I think nature is more important. So that alone is sort of a politically incorrect view to have. I'm pretty moderate on the issue of guns. I'm pretty moderate on the issue of abortion.
No, I'm saying the union vote happened and literally nothing changed at all. Nobody got mad over it. Nobody protested over it. Nobody, like, that just didn't happen. It's a really complicated process to get things moving in our government. And we shouldn't have the only progressives who have been able to win elections give up their political power for something that's so, I don't know, that's a campaign made up by podcasters and whatever in a really comical fashion that imagines politics works like a cartoon where you simply yell emotional things and get what you want. Politics is a lot more complicated than that, sadly.
And there's a bunch of things that I'm like
I'm not
middle
gonna say
ground
they
on,
shouldn't
kind of,
have voted on
you
it.
know. So go ahead. Now
yeah.
you got to embarrass
My
yourself
most
too.
controversial position is I don't think there should be Kankit Pride. Now your turn.
He was gonna say that. He was gonna
But
say
there was
it.
a lot less to
Careful,
lose.
that's a hot
there,
button topic on
of course.
social
We
media
just lost
these days.
5,000
Oh no,
subscribers.
my teammate's
Sorry,
not
guys.
here.
Okay, the cop-out answer is that the conservative position that people tend to shit on me in the left from is the fact that I believe that market economies can be, even in the long run, a beneficial
How
component of human
controversial.
civilization.
How
in an ethical way.
controversial,
But that's
Vaush.
such a cop-out answer
Oh,
because that precludes you being an anarchist, which, like,
canceled.
nobody is. So I feel like the most conservative answer that I actually have is that while we shouldn't shame anyone for it, for not fitting within this purview, we have to recognize, just like statistically and sociologically, that there are overwhelming benefits to the raising of a child in a two-parent household. I don't care if those parents are gay or straight or I do not care, adopted, whatever. And I don't agree with shaming, like, single mothers, because I think that's really fucked up, and single
Yeah.
mothers work harder than any other people I know.
No.
However, we should recognize that for the good of the kids, if nobody else, it's probably important that more than one person be responsible for raising them.
Hashtag save the
Yeah,
children,
that's
am
a
I
good
right?
answer. There's
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
there's two others that you could have said. I know you have an
Save the
unorthodox take on
kids.
rent control, which is probably not popular among the left, and I know you also have.
No.
I
Come
like
back.
that Kyle's
Take-
like bringing
No,
up
I
your
know.
shit
I
for
did
you.
it.
Look, I watch his stuff. I know. And then the other
2,000
one is
subs lost. Let's
trade.
get a couple.
On trade, you're not as protectionist as I am or Krystal is, right? So you're
Oh,
a little
yeah,
more of a free trader.
I'm a pretty big fan of, like, what I guess most people would call globalism. Yeah, I think that since America is a democracy, a flawed one, but still a democracy, unlike, say, China, that we have a moral responsibility to have a significant influence on global trade. Because if we don't, countries like China and Russia will, which are more autocratic, meaning that we'll be essentially ceding
that
power
shot.
to
Get in.
autocrats, which I think is morally wrong. So I think the best thing that we can really do is use, like, multinational trade agreements to try to force developing countries, like, higher up, to try to give them, like, workers' rights, or at the very least say, we won't barter with your country unless you give your workers X set of rights or whatever. Some
Do
people
you
just
think we've used our trade, like, do you think the trade agreements that have actually passed have done that?
God, no, not even slightly.
Yeah, he's not
Then
crazy. I said
okay.
I'm
controversial.
not talking about
I'm not
nationwide.
insane.
About the Amazon
I think,
thing.
but in principle, like, if we had a strong left-leaning leadership and we were like, okay, we've got a huge GDP, we're going to try to use it for good. We're not trading with your country unless you sign by this UN-like backed list of workers' rights that you have to hold to. If we go to your factories and we find out that people aren't being paid X, they're not being given bathroom breaks, et cetera, then we're not dealing with your country. Every country in the world will bend over backwards to make sure they can continue trading with the U.S. That would
Okay.
be a good use of our economic power, I think.
Okay, I can see that. But you're not going to go to Ohio and be like, NAFTA was actually great, guys. I don't know what you're talking about. It was
he wouldn't say
amazing.
that.
Well, I wouldn't go to Ohio and say that. No.
Vaush, thank you. It's been so fun talking to you. We really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah,
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
Plug your stuff for everybody so they know where to find you.
I'm Vaush everywhere, and that's Vaush. Many scholars disagree on the spelling, but that's I'm told that's actually the appropriate one. I really appreciate the both of you coming on. Though I am not as
Coming on.
illustrious as the two of you, I'd be more than happy to have you on my stream at any points in the future, and it's just been a delight to finally get to speak to you both.
Really fascinating conversation. I enjoyed that a lot. And I think one of the things that I took away from our going back on some of the areas of disagreement is that sometimes it's not so much even that you disagree with the person, it's that they have certain sensitivities that you don't have. Like he's very sensitive to this idea of like the populist right is fraudulent. And they use this terminology of like woke is bad to dismiss every progressive social outcome. Whereas my sensitivity tends to be more like, oh, these institutions of power co-opt this language when they don't have, and they just use it to like cloak themselves in the mantra of being good people. And that's like more where my concerns are. So that was one of the things that maybe it's an obvious point, but was kind of a revelation to me. And I wonder how often like our different sensitivities on issues, even with him in the comments he made about pride and kink and how that was really upsetting to a lot of people, where if you're assuming everybody has bad intentions, you end up in a place of just writing them off altogether when in fact you actually pretty much agree.
Yeah, I mean, so probably the biggest disagreement he's had with us over time, it does go back to like populist right stuff. Who are you going to work with and why?
Right.
And I always tried to make clear whenever I discuss that issue that I mean only in the areas where we actually agree.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you find somebody who actually is for the $2,000 checks,
It's about their
I'll work with
rhetoric,
them on
though.
the $2,000 checks. I don't care that they supported the Afghanistan war. I mean, I do.
If you give them power, if you give right-wing populists your power through your rhetoric, that's what matters. It's not if you like. It's if you give credence to their conspiracy theories and all that stuff. It doesn't matter. Like, if you work on an issue together, that's totally different from talking all the time with their dog whistles and stuff like that and giving them, like, I don't know, the verbiage.
Do care, but I care.
In this context. Yeah.
In this context, I don't care because you're for the thing that I'm in favor of. $15 minimum wage, same thing. Unionization, same thing. Whatever it might be. So I always try to be clear. Like when I say I'm working with this person, it is narrow and limited to the areas only where I agree. And then on the areas where I disagree, not only will I fight them, I'll probably fight them harder than anybody else, right? And I think his fear and why he critiqued my take on that is this idea that, yeah, but if you work with them on that stuff, then you're sort of normalizing the other stuff. I think that's the argument he would make, that you're saying this person is within the realm of respectable discourse. And so, therefore, whether or not you want to, it's unintentional or whatever, but you're sort of legitimizing the other opinions. Now, again, I disagree with that. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think that's where he's coming from and why he's always like hesitant to admit, like you said, he was stressed.
Yeah, Joseph Stalin was a left-wing populist, yeah. You can argue that Hitler and, oh my god, that's why I don't like the left-wing and right-wing framings. Because Hitler and Mussolini, you can say they started off using left-wing rhetoric. That's why I don't like left-wing and right-wing populism. I like illiberal and liberal populism. Do you believe in democracy or do you believe in authoritarianism? Stuff like that. Because left and right doesn't really make sense in the context of anything. There's right-wingers that use populist rhetoric, and there's left-wingers that use populist rhetoric. And then there's authoritarians and, you know, Stalin was an illiberal populist, yeah. An authoritarian populist. But left and right doesn't make sense, because again, Mussolini started off as a communist, right? Didn't he use that language? Workers' rights.
In the point that
Workers'
populist right
rights.
or
We are the
fraudulent. I
Workers'
totally
Party.
agree, but my take
Trust
is that
me,
they're
please.
fraudulent only
Trust me.
when it's the elected officials. I think there are
Please.
plenty of voters, and you've met many of them, probably more than anybody else.
Plenty of voters, and they have zero representation.
Zero, yeah, they're
I mean,
like union guys who are
No,
all,
but Hitler wasn't left-wing. He was right-wing, but he was a left-wing populist. Wow, that's why I don't... See, that's why I don't like it. That's exactly why I don't like it. He co-opted left-wing rhetoric. He wasn't a left-winger.
for left-wing economic positions, but then they're also super socially conservative. And when I say socially conservative, I mean pro-gun, anti-abortion, probably anti-immigration, and a bunch of
And
stuff.
are going to say some shit that is going to not meet
Yeah, but-
muster.
But that's it. Like he does too, and I do too. Like
Yeah.
we're
Yes.
people like that too, in a sense.
And I guess my view is just like the same lens of belief in redemption and forgiveness and bringing people
I'm probably
along
gonna
that we
go
bring
into
to other
politics,
spaces, I think
political
we should bring to this
communications,
discourse as well. He also made a
messaging.
comment that I wanted to dig in a little more on, but then the conversation went in
This
another
YouTube
direction.
thing
He was
isn't
talking
going to be a
about how,
job. I would do this
our
if
current
it
system, what
could
it's
be,
doing,
but
is constantly radicalizing
not
people.
good
That
enough.
like every day there's someone who's becoming radicalized, whether it's on the right or the left, and
Easy
that's part
shot.
of why
No, I
he
suck.
sees the populist right as kind of a unique threat. And it's interesting because in the context of Rising and my work in the past and moving forward with Sagar, I've had the exact opposite experience of the fact that I'm even sitting there at the table with someone who's nominally on the right and engaging with that person in, what I try my best to be an honest and good faith way, has actually de-radicalized people and brought them to a place where they can again start having conversations with people in their lives that they weren't able to talk to about politics again, that they have a model of like, oh, there actually are places where we might be speaking the same language. We might actually have even the same solutions. We might have the same views of these things. So my experience in working with someone on the populist right, who I consider to be a good faith actor, and everything in my experience with him would suggest that he really is trying to figure these things out as best he can, has been the exact opposite of pushing people to the fringe.
Well, I think he would argue, no, you're actually radicalizing people in a left-wing direction. So I think that was his point. It's either people are going to be radicalized in a right-wing direction, going down the Tucker Carlson populist right pipeline, or they're going to be radicalized in a left-wing direction, whether it's...
I guess what I would say is I definitely haven't had a single experience of someone starting to consume rising content and being radicalized in a right-wing direction. I've definitely had people move to the left, but I've never
libertarian,
at least been informed, had that experience of people being radicalized.
Okay, I think we should drop the term radicalized because we're not defining it, so we don't know what it means when we say somebody's radicalized or not.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it is, yes, he originally argued that it's a pipeline to the right. Your show would be a pipeline to the right.
Yeah.
And the point you're making is actually, no, it's a pipeline to the left.
Yeah.
Well, and I've had the same experience in the sense that every time I go to Politicon, I had the same thing. People would walk up to me. I used to be a big-time Ben Shapiro fan. I used to be a big-time Steven Crowder fan. I used to be a big-time fill in the blank with whatever excruciatingly terrible right-wing host, Stefan Molyneux, whatever.
Yeah.
And I started watching your stuff, and now I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I'm a lefty. And so, yes, I've had the exact same experience. And I wish I forgot to bring this up to him. It didn't occur to me in the time, but part of that process.
No, Hitler was far right, ultra nationalist, but he used left wing rhetoric to get popular support. Because some left wing rhetoric is popular. But he wasn't a left winger. He was
actually giving credit
far
where it's
right
due.
ultra nationalist.
So that's why when you
I think that's a good point.
He was still a populist.
And I've said this a bunch on my channel. I wish
He's
I said
not
it
a
to him.
fake
So I'd be curious in his
populist.
response.
That's not how that
I think he
works.
would agree, although I don't know. Yes, when you say
all fake populist means is you gear your rhetoric in a way that like targets, like, I am one of you. We are the common man fighting for a common purpose. In this country, the country is owned by elites, and the immigrants are taking over. We must rise up for our homeland, and reject those other people who are trying to change our culture. Like, that's populism, man. That is populism. In the same way that, corporations are ran by corrupt big pharma executives who are corrupt and making our healthcare system for profit. We must come together as people to defeat the corrupt capitalist class. One of those forms of populism can be honest and one can be dishonest. I don't know. It really depends. Like Bernie Sanders, that form, I'm so bad. Bernie Sanders' form of populism is liberal populism. So Bernie Sanders does not have authoritarian intentions. He wants to make people mad so that he can use those people to pressure the current system to change. Trump doesn't give a shit about any of that. He cares about only power. If breaking the current system helps him maintain power, that's what he's going to do.
Tim, because I'd be curious in his response, because I think he would agree, although I don't know. Yes, when you say, correct, Tucker, when you argued against John Bolton and you took the anti-war position and he took a pro-war position, you were right on that. And now let me tell you why the thing you said on economics is actually you're a complete fraud because you say you're in favor of whatever, limiting the amount of money.
This is where it gets bad because Tucker wasn't right on anything. He was vaguely signaling to basically isolationism.
Hey, point over here, credit where credit is due. Exactly. But if you just say everything is bad and wrong and terrible and I'm not going to give you credit even when you say something obviously correct, people are going to shut down and be like, fuck you, I'm not going to listen to you.
Well, and that also applies to when you're honest about like the left or the Democratic Party.
Yes, but I will say this too, to that point. I think his criticism is true of some people. I just don't think it's true of you. So, and what I mean by that is you do have plenty of lefties who, they just 24/7 bash Democrats. And it's like, I get it. I understand why you're bashing Democrats. I bash Democrats from a left-wing position too. But if you're not bashing the Republicans,
I didn't use this in populist rhetoric.
You might not even realize the impact that your content is having.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's actually a problem. Like, and the response of like, well, duh, obviously they're terrible. It's like, yes, it's duh to you. But if some fucking 17-year-old who doesn't know their ass from their elbow just gets into politics and starts on your content and they watch 20 videos and every single one of them is bashing Democrats, it's not duh to them. They might be like, oh yeah, the Democrats are terrible. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
And so even though there's a big difference between Tim Pool.
I need one more goal in 26 seconds to go to overtime.
The Democrats are terrible. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
And so even though there's a big difference between Tim Pool and lefties who only bash Democrats, like ultimately you might end up creating more of the Tim Pool types without even realizing it. You see what I'm saying?
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, but that's not true of you, and it's not true
Let's
of me.
go,
because I
teammate.
bash
Love
everybody,
you.
and I'm proud to do
And
that.
like, I'm not going to say I get the balance right, like that I'm perfect and I always get the balance right, but I'm very cognizant of that. Of like,
Yes, I know
because
you
in
are.
some ways it is less interesting to me what's going on the Republican side, because I do feel like they're all ridiculous. There's not one of them who like is really I have any faith in or interest in, but it's still incredibly relevant, and I do find it interesting in terms. I mean, it's one of two major political parties, and they're going through this whole exercise of like trying to pretend they're about something that they're not really about, and cloaking themselves in the language of the working class while selling them out. I mean, those dynamics are really interesting to dig into if you do it, if you do it in
I
the
should
right
have
way.
tried to block it.
So
I don't know.
that's
I
definitely something
froze.
that I'm cognizant
no.
of. And also, again, Vaush posited that he thought my goal was just to like convince people Democrats are evil. That's really not my goal at all.
Well, I know,
and
and
I definitely try also to give credit to Biden and the Democrats when they deserve it, because my goal in all of this is just to try to be an honest actor is really the bottom line.
Yeah, but see, when he was saying that, I wanted you to respond the way I just responded now, which is to say, no, actually, I bash Republicans all the time. We do plenty of segments on that.
Yeah.
But instead of saying that, you went the other direction and said, I give Democrats credit all the time. And I was like, you should have said I bash Republicans more.
Well, I'm going to handle my answers.
And I understand that, but the examples of you giving Democrats credit are few and far between. I mean, in your defense, it's because they've given you very few things to praise them over.
But I guess my point is more that my intention doesn't really revolve around the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. It's a different project that's about, the
If you support packing the court, you are authoritarian. That's not how that works. Dummy.
way that people in the population feel about each other and feel about elite institutions and the people who are keeping the status quo the way that it is. But
yeah, my mission is different. It's just to tell the truth as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all it is. I'm not trying to do anything beyond that, but it just so happens that, my content somewhat balances out in the sense that I'm sort of going after everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's not purposeful. It's just, that's the way I feel when I look at what's happening. Then I end up pointing my metaphorical machine gun in every single direction. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think I do have like secondary or ancillary goals of like unification of the left, but really it's more like pushing the policies that I believe in and also just calling it as I see it and just talking about whatever I find interesting. I'm under no illusions about how.
Yeah, let's see this.
I have to tell you guys, I don't know how much of this I'm supposed to say. I don't want to get anybody who I'm close to in trouble, but listen, this is all out there for you to see with your own two eyes. It's something that I realized and recognized, and so I'm going to talk about it because I think it's gross. So, as you all know, Krystal and Sagar just recently left the Hill. They're going independent. In my opinion, that's where they should have been all along. I mean, they always had the ability and the talent. When you start something under the wing of a company.
Marxist, Leninist be like, I'd rather live under authoritarianism than a representative liberal democracy where the people don't have enough power. Same thing,
It
basically.
could feel like you have more
I want a one-party government, the CCP.
security, but, if my dumbass could make it in this format, Krystal and Sagar obviously could make it in this format. So I'm very happy for them. Now, The Hill, which of course is the company where they did Rising, it's the corporation where they did their show Rising. The Hill YouTube channel pulled down Krystal and Sagar's farewell video after they left. So they only left it up for what, 2 days, 3 days, something like that, before they pulled it down. Now, I also happen to know that when Krystal and Sagar planned their exit, everything was relatively amicable, you could say, but they had everything organized and structured and ready to go. And there was a lot of thought and dedication that went into making some of these decisions. So they had the title for their video all set and ready to go. They had, the order ready to go. So in other words, their exit video would be the first video of the day for that show, and it would be premiered. And of course, when a video is premiered, and when it's the first video, typically that video does very well. So they had their title ready. They had the video ready to premiere. And then behind the scenes, somebody decided, let's change the title to something incredibly vague that has no reference whatsoever about how Krystal and Sagar are leaving. The title was like, Today on Rising or some shit. And they removed it from a premiere. Now, if I'm not mistaken, most of the time, if not every time they do a show, the first video is premiered.
Whatever the hell that
So they removed
means
the video
fake.
from premiere, made it
Not
a regular
real.
video, changed the title to something incredibly vague and general, to make it sound like Krystal and Sagar weren't leaving, but it gets even worse. There were moments where they turned the comments off. And there were other moments where they turned the likes and dislikes off. So, listen, I don't know the specifics in terms of behind the scenes at corporate media, at The Hill, but there was obviously some sort of tug of war going on. And this doesn't take a genius to figure out. All you had to do was watch what was happening. Of course, I was watching every step of the way, and now, 2 days later, 3 days later, they pulled down their farewell video. So in other words, now they're trying to make it so if you tune into Rising and you see other hosts, you're like, okay, I don't know where Krystal and Sagar are. I guess they're just on vacation, taking a day off. Maybe they'll be back eventually. But I guess I should stay and watch the show.
Isn't it like Ryan, Grimm, and somebody else? Those are the new people.
It's a very sleazy, underhanded attempt to try to dupe the audience into thinking that what just happened didn't really happen. But it gets even worse.
So
it gets
good.
even worse. They cut a brand new promo video for the show after Krystal and Sagar left. Now understand, Rising is Krystal and Sagar's baby. They came up with the idea. If they're leaving the Hill, the right thing for the Hill to do is very simple. The right thing for the Hill to do is to give them, the send-off of royalty. Hey guys, we love you. Just so you know, you're irreplaceable. You built this amazing thing, this amazing show on this channel and made it what it is.
Baby.
It's
I'm
never
sorry
going
to
to be the
tell
same
ya.
without you.
That's show business.
Here's a cake. We're going to miss you.
Here's a cake.
And you know what?
I agree.
We're gonna change the branding of the channel away from Rising with Krystal and Sagar. We're not gonna have Rising anymore. We're gonna change the name of the show and have a new show because we can't replicate what you guys did. You guys are unique. You're special. You're your own thing. Nobody can fill your shoes. It's not possible. Instead, like I said, they tried to bury the fact that they left, change the title on the video, change it from a premiere to a regular video, turn the comments off and on, and then cut a fucking promo the day after they left. The promo trying to say like, hey, don't go anywhere. Please don't go anywhere, audience. Don't go anywhere. Don't be mad. We're one of the top news shows on YouTube, and that's never going to change. Never going to change. It was Krystal and Sagar who made it the #1 show on YouTube. Now they're not there. What do you mean that's never going to change? By the way, in the promo, they put a lot of people in the video who definitely don't want to be in that video. They put Shoe on Head, for example. They put Matt Taibbi. They put a number of anti-establishment voices in the promo as if those people signed off on the fact that, yeah, Krystal and Sagar are leaving, but I want you to stick around and watch whatever the fuck else is going to, take the time slot at the Hill. Go talk to them. My guess is they wouldn't have that opinion. And by the way, they also threw in clowns like Madison Cawthorn in the video, which goes to show you that whoever's behind the scenes making the decisions now has no idea what the essence of the show Rising was. If you're putting Madison Cawthorn in the same video as Matt Taibbi and Shoe on Head as say anti-establishment, you're not getting the gist of the show. You don't even understand the basics of the show. You don't get the framework of it. So listen, that's a sleazy, underhanded thing. Soon, right after they leave, you cut a promo for the new show, which is the same label. That's gross. Now I'm in a position, since Krystal and Sagar are out at the Hill, I'm in a position to tell you guys my experience in dealing with corporate media behind the scenes.
Oh.
So Krystal and I, of
Spilling
course,
the
we
beans.
started the podcast, Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. And, the idea behind it is very straightforward and very simple. I respect Krystal as an interviewer. I think she's phenomenal at it. I also respect the fact that she seemingly has created this lane for herself where she has 1 foot in the new media world and 1 foot in the official world, which sort of gives her access to a lot of very big-name people in terms of interviewing. And so we got together. We decided to do a show. And, it in many ways, it's a match made in heaven. And, but there were pressures behind the scenes that you guys didn't know about. So Krystal had gotten permission to do Krystal, Kyle, and Friends, and we had gotten permission to put the podcasts on YouTube. And any of you who are paid subs to our Substack, you pay $5 a month and you get the video on YouTube a day early. Everybody else gets access to the free audio a day later. But the first, was it the first or the first 2 or 3 or something, Krystal, Kyle, and Friends podcasts were free videos on YouTube. Well, even though Krystal had gotten permission to put it on YouTube, immediately after our premiere, the episode with Marianne Williamson, which did phenomenally well, by the way, I haven't checked the numbers now, but it's got to be over 300,000 views on that video, we were told that if we put the second episode on YouTube, there could be litigation. There was a lawsuit threatened. After Krystal had already gotten permission to put our show on YouTube, whoever's one of the higher-ups there took a look at the fact that we had a gigantic launch with over 300,000 views. And they did an about-face and said, if you put that second video up there, there could be litigation. We might sue you.
Here's the
Now understand
Discord.
something.
That link might
This
be
is
broken.
after I told an audience of hundreds of thousands of people who watched that inaugural episode. This is how it's going to work. pay through the Substack, $5 a month. You get every video on YouTube. And then for people who don't pay, you get the audio version for free on any podcast platform, and you don't have to pay anything. It's just available. So after I told hundreds of thousands of people this is how it's going to work, there's a lawsuit threatened. If you put that second one up, we might come after you. Well, of course, panic sets in, and everybody's losing their mind. And I'm a man of my word. I told you guys it's going on YouTube. So guess what? It's going on YouTube. I'm not going to let some nameless, faceless corporate douchebag determine what happens on my channel when I've never even had a conversation with any of the higher-ups at the Hill. Why would I let them control what I do? Now, does that put Krystal in a weird situation? Of course it does. But I'm the one who's making the decision. It's not Krystal. What are you going to do?
I don't care about Krystal.
Can't sue me. I'm not in any sort of contract.
I don't care if Krystal is on contract. I shall make this decision. If it brings her down, so be it. I'm going to own all the corporatists.
And if you go after her, it's not going to work because she didn't make the decision. I'm making the decision. So anyway, there was basically a standoff, and at the last minute, the higher-ups at the Hill backed down because I guess they knew that we weren't going to fold, and so we posted it, and nobody knew about any of that stuff behind the scenes. But it was a very tense moment.
By the way, that is a very crappy corporation, and I hate them because they are evil corporations, and corporations are evil. No, but like for real though, the guy that owns the Hill, isn't he like the crazy Trump guy? And he's like really bad guy, not a good dude. It
was a very, very tense moment.
Oh,
and obviously it was incredibly tumultuous for everybody involved. But definitely the most tumultuous for Krystal.
I was watching over here.
But I haven't even gotten to what I think is the worst part yet. So again, Krystal and I get together, decide we're going to do this podcast. We're really excited for it. The format of the podcast is incredibly ambitious, the way we went about structuring it. Here's why. Guys, we know, Krystal and I know, the amount of money that people with similar public profiles make when they do their podcasts. And the bottom line is this. If we were to accept advertisers, we would get paid, son. We would get paid. And there's a variety of ways you can do advertisements. You could do the read-off advertisements, or you could do the traditional YouTube advertisements, which in my opinion are nowhere near as bad as the reading advertisements, because the YouTube advertisements, there's a buffer between you and the advertiser. So in other words, Google has a marketing team that deals with the advertisers, and I never have to talk to an advertiser ever. So I really don't have a problem in principle with the YouTube ads because I never have to talk to any of the advertisers, so there's no conflict of interest. I don't feel beholden to anybody on that front. But we decided, when it comes to Krystal, Kyle, and friends,
just do like Nordic VPN. I don't know. Are you really gonna change your commentary because a VPN sponsors your podcast? I don't know. What about like granola bars or something?
We're gonna be
what kind of
unique.
Sponsors are we talking here?
And we said, let's go
Manscaped,
all
maybe?
in on this idea of small dollar donations and small dollar subscribers. So not only did we forego YouTube advertisements.
Listen, guys, we are going to own the capitalist class by not taking a Manscaped advertisement. And instead, guess what? We're going to make you feel bad about not paying us. You got to donate to our show, dumb peasants. Come on, guys. Let's get the money flowing. This is a grassroots show. Grassroots. If we would have taken that Manscaped contract, guess what? I'd be corrupt. I'm not going to be corrupt. If we would have done a VPN, guess what? We would have been biased towards VPNs. We're going to have you pay for it, idiots. God, now my takes are so clean, full of good populist takes. No corporate interest anymore, baby. No Manscaped.
Which, again, I don't have a problem with in principle. But we did forego YouTube advertisements. We also decided we're going to forego all ads.
Who cares if Krystal is under contract? They're not trying to keep her silent. They're obviously really shitty about their content ownership. She did not start her own job. She signed a contract with Rising. And, they made their own show, true, but that's not how contracts work. Even if they were trying to have rights of Krystal Ball, like, hey, you can't appear on any other show, that isn't the same as trying to silence her. Although removing the video is really crappy. That's how it works. And I don't like that, but don't sign the contract. And we should be holding these companies to more and higher standards when it comes to contracts, but still, it's funny.
So, in other words, the only way this thing works is if you guys like it enough and believe in it enough.
No, I disagree. If you take a manscaping contract, you talk about a ball shaver, it's not as crazy as you think. It's a shaver for your it's a manscaping tool. Like, that's not going to make you corrupt. having connections to people who work in meat, like that's not how the world works.
Enough to pay the $5 a month to get the video a day early. The only way this works is if enough people think it's worth $5 a month to see the video of our podcasts. So I'm not going to lie to you guys. We're making probably 25% of what we could make when it comes to the money with this podcast. But you know what? We made that decision. We don't care. We don't care because
If you don't care, stop talking about it then.
we believe in something above and beyond the ad model, because that's what new media and independent media is supposed to be all about. It's supposed to be
How
about
would Manscaped take advantage of... Okay, you just believe that corporations bad. You don't see the inner workings of how these relationships work. They wouldn't be under contract with, like... Whatever.
about the people. It's supposed to be about regular folks. It's supposed to be about small dollar donations saying, hey, we believe in you guys, and so we'll pay the $5 for the
He
video.
just feels
because,
principled about it. He doesn't have any actual
this
reason
is
to
how
do it
you
that way.
decided to fund it in
My
a
game
more
just freaking
pure
froze. No way.
way. Well, guess what? After we already made that decision, what happened? Krystal was told after the fact, oh, by the way, you're not even allowed to acknowledge the existence of Krystal, Kyle, and Friends, your other podcast, when you're doing the show Rising on the Hill.
That sounds pretty normal for a contract.
We made the decision to take $0.00 in ad money. And then more than half of our potential reach is cut out. So understand, I don't know how many YouTube subs I had when we launched Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. 900,000, something like that. The Hill is in front of me. They have over 1 million subscribers, and I think they had more subscribers at the time that we launched. And only I'm allowed to talk to my audience to try to subscribe to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. She's not even allowed to acknowledge its existence. So basically, the higher-ups in corporate media broke one of our legs and told us, hey, go run a marathon.
I'm talking about why didn't they take advertisements? You can take Blue Chew advertisements. That's like a Viagra replacement. Viagra, you can do Manscaped. I see a lot of Nordic VPN. That would have changed nothing about the show. Instead of begging your following to pay for your content, to pay you, why not take that advertisement money? Like you're transferring wealth from the bottom to you. Have them donate that money. Have your viewers donate that money to frickin' Nina Turner or something. Take the Manscaped contract, and instead of money going to you, have it go to Nina Turner. I want to support Nina Turner. It's just a fundamental flaw in how he views the world working. It's like, this isn't how things actually work. But anyway, thanks for hanging out. Here's Discord if you want to continue the conversation. Oh, 1 second. You gotta be savvy about how the world works. I know he's doing it on principle. If your principles are that extreme that you do stupid things, then I don't like... You can act on principle and not be a dumbass while doing it. You know what principle would be? Hey, I'm going to take this money from this corporation, from Manscaped. I'm going to take this money and not let it affect my political opinions. You know, that's principled. Instead of begging my working class viewers for donations for my side podcast, I'm going to get some advertising revenue. I'm going to get that in a very honest way. I'm just talking about Manscaped, baby. All I'm talking about. Blue Chew, I'm talking about Viagra and manscaping. Guess what, viewers? I'm so principled. I want Medicare for All to get done. You know how we're going to do that? Nina Turner is running right now. Let's get her elected. Let's get Nina Turner elected to Congress. Donate to her instead of donating to my dumb podcast. That gets like 5,000 viewers because they have it behind a paywall. That's all I'm saying. You can be principled and not dumb. You don't gotta be too far on either side. Thanks for hanging out. I don't want to seem too bitter, but it's like, dude, we gotta win somehow. You don't gotta go full Vaush and be like, I'm not acting on principle whatsoever. But don't let your principles actively hurt people because you're too arrogant and blind and stubborn to look any other direction from your own like worldview. Okay, lo-fi girl. What conflict of interest does Manscaped present? Please let me know. Just let me know. Please. The ball shaving industrial complex. I'm not saying like talk about ABC shows or something or media companies. You can do advertisements for D Live. You can talk about independent media companies. They pay for advertisements all the time. If you're really about that. Yeah, Vaush doesn't take ads because of aesthetics. Ugh. But all of Vaush's content is completely free though. There's nothing behind a paywall, and he never says donate to me. He never says, "Hey, please donate this money if you want to see more of this content." He never says that. People donate to him because they want to donate to him, and they're part of that community. It's not an existential thing. It's not like, "Hey, if you don't donate to this or whatever, then I'm gonna starve or whatever." Manscaped? What do you mean? They literally do nothing but They're an upstart corporation about ball shaving. Wait, is your standard? Okay, never mind. Your standard for everything is corporation bad. Literally, like, I can make a corporation right now. I'll make my own little corporation, baby. I will be corrupt. At that point, I will be gone. Who's that one guy on Twitter that he's a CEO, but he's like really progressive. And he always talks about how, is it Price? Dan Price, Seattle. This guy always talks about, he's a CEO. He cut his pay by $1 million. NordVPN, whatever, Nordic. Nordic is socialism, right? The Nordic countries is socialism, basically. I'm trying to put this on the screen here. This guy. Is he evil because he has a corporation? Elon Musk. Yeah, every business owner is actually Elon Musk.